Chapter 13:18. You should have noticed it by now, right? After walking for a while in the dense forest, Mad Eye, who was leading the way, suddenly opened his mouth and muttered to himself. No one knew who he was talking to. You go your own way. We know what to do. 2 seconds later, Nezru, who was following behind him, took the opportunity to speak. Then, he turned his head back quietly and gave Garlic Head and the others a look. Garlic Head understood tacitly and immediately slowed down his pace. He waited for the pirates to pass by and slowly walked to Blackbeard's side. Captain. Garlic Head had just opened his mouth to greet the captain when Blackbeard directly said, "No matter. If you encounter any situation, you can act according to the circumstances. Act first and report later." "Yes." Garlic Head respectfully replied and once again caught up with the pirates. From the perspective of the bystanders, this group of people's conversation might be somewhat confusing and inexplicable. However, the people involved were very clear that they were discussing the same thing. In this forest, there must be someone else. Broken branches, overturned rocks on both sides of the road, traces of heavy objects being dragged, and so on. From the various traces left behind in the forest, it was inferred that recently, a large group of people had collected various materials in this forest and moved them to a certain place. Although it was unknown whether they wanted to hoard materials or build some kind of facility, no matter the situation, the possibility of this group of people still remaining in the vicinity of Devil Chomp Island was very high. In other words, as the latecomers, the pirates could encounter these unknown people at any time and even have a conflict with them. Buzz. The terrible situation happened 5 minutes later. Accompanied by a strange muffled sound, Mad Eye's footsteps stopped. "It's a magic array." Mad Eye was calm. Even if he was handcuffed and his combat power was restricted, he still had the demeanor of a captain. "Don't move." Nezru quickly saw that Mad Eye's right foot had stepped into the edge of a huge magic array. Therefore, he hurriedly opened his arms and blocked his companions behind him. The entire pirate expedition team took advantage of this opportunity to stop for a moment. "Oomph." Mad Eye sneered and raised the handcuffs on his hands. "Do you think I would dare to move around in my current state?" Nezru didn't pay any attention to him. He just glanced around the forest and then stepped forward to inspect the magic array. At this moment, the activated magic circle was glowing faintly and emitting a soft, buzzing sound. If one were to take a closer look, they would be able to see some runes flowing in a linear pattern in the air above the magic circle. On the ground, there were also clear runes floating. Nestra looked along the edge of the magic circle and discovered that the curve of the edge was very small and it extended to a very far place. It could be seen that this magic circle covered a very large area in front of them. "You can read it?" Mad Eye saw Nethru's concentration, and he looked forward to it. "No, I don't understand at all." Nethru didn't beat around the bush and gave a very honest answer. "Then why are you pretending to look at me?" Crazy, I wasn't going to be polite. Even though he was now a prisoner, he was still going to say whatever he wanted. "Heh, it's normal to look at it." Before Nethru could reply, Fong Bujue's voice rang out. "Just like those people whose engines have blown up. They don't know anything about mechanics, but they will still stand there and look at it for a long time. It's as if they can fix the car just by looking at it." As they were talking, Brother Jew walked up from behind. Crazy Eye looked back at him and snorted. "Oomph. Look at your casual attitude. You must be able to understand it, right?" "Of course I can," Fong Bujue replied. In fact, Fong Bujue could really understand the magic circle this time. Even if he didn't do a hard analysis from the data perspective, he could still understand the principle behind it, because this is one of the sensing circles of the Phantom Demon Church. Brother Jew said as he walked to Crazy Eye's side. Without any warning, he suddenly patted Crazy Eye's back. Crazy Eye was caught off guard by this sudden action. He was immediately pushed forward a few steps, and his whole body was pushed into the magic circle. "What are you doing?" Crazy Eye, who had regained his footing, suddenly turned around and glared at Brother Jew. "I'm just using my actions to tell you that this magic circle is not offensive," Fong Bujue replied calmly. As soon as he finished speaking, Madman Eye looked down at himself. He had indeed not suffered any injuries. Then you can come in by yourself. Why did you push me? Crazy, I was still a little depressed. So he added another sentence. What are you saying? What if my judgment is wrong? It's better for you to die than for me to die. Fong Bujua used his actions to prove that arguing with him would only make him more depressed. When Crazy Eye heard this, he blew his beard and glared, and his anger level shot up. Fong Bujua did not want to continue teasing this honest captive, so he quickly changed the topic. To put it bluntly, this is like a thin string with a bell. It's mainly used to inform the person who set up the magic circle that someone has entered the range of the magic circle. How do you know so much? Crazy, I asked again. Brother Jew shrugged. I once had Taliom, who is in charge of this area, show me the patterns and functions of the Phantom Demon Church's magic circles. There aren't that many, 100 or so, and most of them have a certain pattern. I can draw some of them. From what you're saying, you have a relationship with the Phantom Demon Church? Crazy, I asked tentatively. Yes, I do. Fong Bujua said as he walked into the magic circle. He gave Nezru a look, meaning that they could continue moving forward. However, that kind of relationship may not be trustworthy at a critical moment. Nezru received his instructions and motioned for the people behind to follow. So, the team began to move again. Using each other, right? Crazy Eye also stepped forward again and asked as he walked. Something like that. Fong Bujua said, my philosophy is that as long as there is no absolute conflict in terms of principles, when the interests are the same, we can cooperate. Hee. It sounds like Blackbeard, and you are now in this kind of relationship. Crazy, I was also an experienced person, and he immediately said the truth. You don't have to worry about that. Fong Bujua did not have much of a reaction to these words. He calmly continued. For now, you should try to survive this situation first. While the two were talking, the 30 people of the pirate exploration team had already walked into the range of the magic circle. From this place, Fong Bujua left his original position and came to the front of the team, almost side by side with Crazy Eye. Because of his relationship with the Phantom Demon Church, it would save a lot of trouble for him to show his face in front. That was true, but in an increasingly tense atmosphere, the team moved forward for another 10 minutes. Just as the surrounding forest was getting denser and denser, something strange happened. Whoosh! Careful! When Nezru shouted this, a magic arrow had already pierced through the wind. This arrow was shot from the side of the forest in front of them, and it did not deviate, going straight for Fong Bujua's face. Brother Jew did not panic. For an attack of this speed, with his reaction speed and the aid of zero time difference, there were many ways to dodge it. However, to prevent Mad Eye, whose combat ability was limited, from being caught in the crossfire, Brother Jew very carefully used telepathic finger to catch the magic arrow in between his fingers. I say, when the magic arrow dissipated, Fong Bujua turned his head and shouted into the forest, "Look carefully before you make a move. You should recognize me, right?" After he said this, he waited for a few seconds, but only silence responded. What's wrong? Brother Jew saw that the ambusher did not respond, so he continued. Do you think I'm an imposter? Are you not sure? But after the second sentence, there was still no response from the forest. At this moment, Fong Bujua vaguely sensed something. After a second, Brother Jew's expression changed. He turned his head and shouted at the pirates behind him, "Retreat." Unfortunately, his shout was a little too late. Almost at the same time he said the word retreat, a strong burst of light erupted from the back of the team, shooting straight into the sky. Intense light erupted from the ground like a volcanic eruption, forming a cylindrical pillar of light that shot into the sky. It quickly expanded and carried out an indiscriminate and terrifying attack on everything in the area. After the explosion, if one looked down at the North Island from above, one could see that a circular hole had been blasted in the island, and the boiling seawater in the hole was still billowing thick smoke. Chapter 1320. Phew, that was a close call. I almost failed miserably. 2 seconds after the explosion, Fong Bujua's figure appeared again. He was holding Mad Eye by the collar with one hand and floating in the air. His position was just at the edge of the explosion area and was not affected by it. You reacted quite quickly. Mad Eye, who was pulled out of the danger zone by Brother Bujua in time, did not change his attitude because of this. It's considered slow. If I had realized what they were going to do a few seconds earlier, I might have been able to counterattack before they made their move, Feng Bujue replied. Mad, I was just about to ask this question when a translucent black sphere slowly rose from the billowing smoke in front of them. Through the smoke, Feng Bujue saw 3 people standing in the sphere. They were Blackbeard, Honghu, and Snow. As the ones in charge of scouting, can you two explain what is this situation? At this time, Blackbeard naturally looked unhappy. Although he and the 2 people beside him were unharmed, his helpers might not be able to escape unscathed from this kind of attack. Feng Bujue said thoughtfully, according to my observation, this should be a combination of Megabrand and Elmikia Flame. Although it is only a combination of an ordinary earth magic and a spirit magic, because the spellcaster's magic energy is extremely high when it is actually released. Who asked you about the principle of magic? Blackbeard did not wait for him to finish and interrupted impatiently. I asked you, why didn't you discover the enemy and send out a signal before this kind of attack was launched? I discovered it. Feng Bujue spread out his hands. Didn't I also shout retreat? You shouted a second earlier. Are you kidding me? Blackbeard asked again. TSK, I wanted to shout earlier too, Feng Bujue said. But there was no energy fluctuation at all before he cast the spell. What could I do? If you don't believe me, you can ask your cadres. As he spoke, he lowered his head and glanced at the smoking seawater. They're not dead yet, right? Blackbeard did not answer his question. Instead, he asked, since there are no energy fluctuations, you shouldn't be able to advance by even a second, right? Indeed, I didn't sense any signs of a powerful spell being cast, but before that wave of attacks came, I caught a magic arrow, Feng Bujue said. So what? Blackbeard asked. Feng Bujue said, generally speaking, that doesn't mean anything. But I'm the kind of person who will come up with 100 possible hypotheses whenever I encounter something. And one of those hypotheses happens to be, this is a positioning arrow. Blackbeard was a very astute person. With Brother Jew's words, many things became clear to him. You mean, there's more than one person on the other side? Blackbeard quickly changed the topic. At this stage, the possibility of that is very high. Feng Bujue replied, you saw the spell just now? Although it's a hybrid spell, it's not very advanced. To be able to produce such power, it's purely relying on the support of a huge amount of mana. He paused for half a second and said, if there's only one person casting the spell, then there's a problem. A sorcerer with such mana, wouldn't he know how to use other more advanced and more efficient spells to attack? Oh, hearing this, Snow also understood. But if it's a large group of average or even weaker sorcerers casting the spell together, then this matter can be explained. That's right. Feng Bujue continued. So, the magic arrow that I took on earlier was undoubtedly used to locate the target for that large group of spellcasters. He paused and said, by the way, judging from the mana that came out of that magic arrow, the guy in charge of locating the target is very strong. I have a general understanding of the strength of the followers of the Phantom Demon Church. This guy must be at the level of a cadre. In other words, he clearly knows me, knows my identity, and heard my warning, but he still launched an attack. Oh, Blackbeard muttered. That's a little strange, huh? Mad Eye laughed dryly at the side. Why do I feel that it's quite normal? He turned his head to look at Brother Jew. For someone like this, just by standing in front of me, I have the urge to hack him to death. The other party couldn't hold back for a moment. I can completely understand. Blackbeard heard this, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. That makes sense. While these people were talking in the sky, in the area that had been flattened by the magic light explosion, in the boiling seawater, one figure after another slowly climbed out of the water. I think I'm deaf from the explosion. The first one to come ashore was Mark Bigneck. As he walked, he shook the big horse head on his neck. Sigh. His brother, Mark Bighoof, followed closely behind. After hearing his brother's line, he sighed and went forward to grab his brother's head with both hands. Idiot! What's the use of shaking it flat? When he said this, he had already grabbed his brother's head and tilted it to the left and right. Mark Big Neck was delighted. It's done. Nonsense. Can't you just pour the mud out of your ears? Although Mark Big Hoof's IQ wasn't high, it was still okay compared to his brother. Perhaps because he had a human head, his IQ had the upper hand. At this time, on a mud slope about 5 or 6 meters away from them, Mr. Volger and Nezru came out of the water one after another. Bah, damn it. I hate taking a bath the most. After spitting out a mouthful of seawater, Mr. Volger opened his mouth and cursed. Nezru, who was next to him, looked very disappointed at this moment, because the reflection in the water had already told Nezru that his cake hair had completely collapsed at this moment, drooped, and turned into an abnormal watermelon taro hairstyle. In addition to these 4 cadres, Garlic Bro, Godfrey, and Marty were basically fine. They quickly came out of the water. However, the situation of the remaining 19 pirates was not very optimistic. Even though they were members of the Blackbeard Pirates, under such an attack, not all of them could survive. Among the 19 pirates, 4 of them could no longer leave the Devil's Maw Island alive. 6 of them were seriously injured and lost their ability to move, and 9 of them had different degrees of injuries. In this situation, Blackbeard still decisively issued an order. He asked the Garlic Bro trio and the wounded pirates who were still able to move to bring back all the injured crew members, and then brought back the 19 pirates who were not injured. Blackbeard, the 3 players, Mad Eye, and the 4 cadres on the ship continued to move forward and left marks along the way so that Garlic Bro and the others could find the way when they brought back reinforcements. In this way, the team of 30 people was sharply reduced to 9 people, and one of them was Mad Eye, who had no combat power and could escape or betray them at any time. Even so, Brother Jew still didn't see the slightest sense of crisis and nervousness from Blackbeard's eyebrows. Although he didn't show it, Fong Bujiwe had a faint feeling in his heart. The purpose of Blackbeard's visit to the Devil's Maw Island was probably not only to find his son, his former subordinates, and the treasure. On this island, there were obviously some hidden secrets. Chapter 1321. You should have noticed it too, right? After walking for a while in the forest, I suddenly spoke to the people behind him. Even with the shackles, I have already discovered those guys. You cannot know yet. Ah, I knew it already. Brother Jew, who was behind Mad Eye, responded in a relaxed tone. We are still within the range of their detection array. It is only natural that we are being monitored to this extent. Then why are you still moving forward so casually? Mad Eye asked. Aren't you afraid that the other party will cast another explosive array on you? Blackbeard, who was behind him, sneered when he heard this. Now what do you mean? Mad Eye looked back at him. Of course, we should go into the forest and kill all the guys who are following us. Killing them is not difficult. At this time, Hong Hu, who had not expressed his opinion for a long time, said, If I want to, I can kill all the stalkers in the surrounding forest in 10 seconds. At this point, he changed the topic. But there is no point in doing that, because they are no longer a threat to us. What do you mean by no threat? Mad Eye asked suspiciously. Isn't it obvious? Hong Hu replied. If they wanted to attack us again, they would have done it long ago. But why are they following us so sneakily? There is only one reason. I'm afraid that the magic from before is the strongest attack that this group of people can use. Snow took over his teammates' words and explained to Mad Eye. Maybe in a short period of time, they can't cast it a second time even if they wanted to. So, in the face of a group of enemies like us who are still fine even after taking a big hit, the only thing they can do now is to follow us in the dark. So what? Mad Eye continued. Even if this group of people doesn't have the intention to attack us for the time being, they're still enemies. Even if you are too lazy to kill them, you should at least capture a few of them alive for questioning, right? Blackbeard snorted again. Well, let's see what Captain Mad Eye's idea is. Before he finished speaking, Blackbeard slowly raised his arm and raised it horizontally. He opened his palm to his side and clenched it. In that instant, a muffled groan came from the forest. In the next second, a figure flew out. Like a piece of metal attracted by a giant magnet, he was sucked into Blackbeard's palm. The person who was captured was wearing a gray robe and a hood. Under the hood was a pale, zombie-like face that was as ugly as a beast's. Ugh! After falling into Blackbeard's hand, this person still let out a muffled groan, but he didn't say a single word. When everyone heard this, they looked over and immediately discovered something. This person's mouth had been sewn shut. His upper and lower lips were pierced back and forth by a metal thread that was as thick as a shoelace. Even a layman could see how crude the suturing technique was. Look at the condition of the wound. It must have been stitched up for more than a day or two, Brother Jew muttered when he saw the man. Nezru. Blackbeard didn't say much. He called out to his cadre, and then threw the captive in his hand toward Nezru. Nezru caught the man easily and pressed him to the ground. Then he took out a small knife from somewhere on his body. With a speed that even Brother Jew felt was very fast, he accurately cut off the suture on the captive's mouth without hurting the captive's lips at all. If you want to live, answer a few of our questions. Nezru's tone was cold and murderous, because he was in a very bad mood at the moment. Nezru's appearance, coupled with the hairstyle of Watermelon Taro, was really a huge file. Perhaps others didn't care much about it, but he cared a lot about it. However, when the captive opened his mouth, another depressing fact was displayed in front of everyone. This guy's tongue had already disappeared. That's really cruel. Even Mr. Volger couldn't help but comment on the scene in front of him. Wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. Snow quickly thought of something. In order to prevent the secret from being leaked, he cut off his subordinate's tongue. This I can understand, but why sew his mouth shut after cutting off his tongue? Hong Hu muttered. It's indeed a little superfluous, and even eating and drinking like this, Just as they were talking, the captive suddenly twitched in pain. There was a strange sound coming from his throat that seemed to come from a very far place. Seeing this strange situation, Mr. Volger, who was very experienced in the underworld, hurried forward and pulled Nezru back a few steps to get him away from the captive. As expected, when Nezru retreated a few meters, something strange happened. It was too late to say, but it happened in the blink of an eye. Accompanied by the strange sound that came from nowhere, it was getting louder and louder. The captive's chest also bulged at an extremely exaggerated rate. When it reached a certain extent, it exploded. Then, in the midst of the exploding blood and broken bones, a dragon's head that was about the size of a rhino's head poked out from the corpse's torso. Then it was a long neck, then claws, body, wings, tail. In the end, a dragon-type beast that was 4 meters tall and more than 9 meters long from the top of its head to the tip of its tail, crawled out from the corpse of the humanoid creature. Obviously, it didn't come out from the body of the captive. Instead, it used the captive's body as a medium similar to a door and crawled out from another space. By the time the strange beast had fully revealed itself, the captive's body had already been torn into a ragged bag of flesh and blood. Oh, I understand now. Facing the monster, Feng Bujue still used a scholarly tone to talk. Cutting off the tongue is to brand a small triggering magic circle in that guy's mouth, and the suture line on his mouth is a magic material. Once the line is cut, it will lead to, "Are you done?" Before Brother Bujue finished his words, Crazy Eye roared and interrupted. What does that have to do with anything? Didn't you see this? Who maybe because Crazy Eye shouted loudly. It attracted the monster's attention. After the dragon-type beast laid down, it immediately swung its tail at Crazy Eye. In the roaring wind, Crazy Eye suddenly turned his head and looked at the incoming dragon tail that was constantly enlarging in his pupils. He was also at a loss for a moment. Boom! Just when Crazy Eye thought he was going to die here, Markhoof's figure flashed and blocked in front of him. He used his strong body to withstand the attack of the beast's tail. After the collision, Markhoof's 4 hooves actually dragged out 4 deep hoof marks on the ground. His face also became a little solemn. Ugh! After catching his breath, Markhoof squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. No, I can't take it. After that, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell sideways. Big brother. Marcos next saw this and roared angrily. He grabbed the machete at his waist and rushed toward the monster. Be careful. On the other side, Mr. Vulture shouted as he went forward to help. This is Wild Dragon. Hearing this, Nezru also followed without saying a word. For a moment, the three officers engaged in a fierce battle with the wild dragon. The surrounding dense forest, soil, and rocks began to collapse at a speed visible to the naked eye. Wild dragon. I haven't seen one for many years. At this time, Blackbeard had already activated his black spherical barrier and retreated to a safe distance. He was still muttering. When Ediani was still here, there were quite a few of them in his territory. So they haven't gone extinct yet. Did you just say, Edianti? A few seconds later, Brother Jew, who was carrying Crazy, I also came near Blackbeard and asked, Are you referring to the god of foolishness, Ediani? Blackbeard's reaction was very calm. Who else could it be? Hong Hu, who came to Devil's Maw Island with Brother Jew last time, undoubtedly remembered this name. He also asked, Captain, you seem to know Ediani? Everyone knows them, Blackbeard replied. When I was young, there were a total of 9 gods in the Chaos Sea. They each occupied an area and did not disturb each other. Every one of them had their own territory and believers. Ediani was just one of the 9 gods that everyone knew. Oh, when Feng Bujua heard this, he immediately exchanged glances with Hong Hu and asked, Then, where are they now? How would I know? Blackbeard asked in return. When the era of the 4 pillar gods came, I left the Chaos Sea. I only know that they didn't leave. Crazy Eye laughed when he heard this. They aren't as smart as you. What? Brother Jew raised his eyebrows and looked at Crazy Eye. What do you mean? You know the whereabouts of the 9 gods. This isn't a secret to begin with, Crazy Eye replied. Many years ago, he glanced at Blackbeard. Not long after that guy left, the 9 gods of the Chaos Sea and the 4 pillar gods had a conflict. After a great battle, the 9 gods suffered a crushing defeat and 4 of them died on the spot. The surviving god of foolishness, god of lies, god of wandering, god of wisdom, and god of truth joined forces to cast a spell and escaped into other planes. Since then, no one has seen them again. He paused. Of course, over the years, there have been rumors that they haven't given up and have left some altars and documents in this plane, hoping that one day they can return here and make a comeback. Oh, Feng Bujua nodded and thought to himself. That means the elf that we roasted and ate when we came to Devil's Maw Island last time, the god of wandering, Walker, was actually super strong. He was secretly active on Devil's Maw Island, accumulating power, but we accidentally tricked him. Speaking of which, how does Uncle Loser calculate the lethality of his feminine form? Is it a causal weapon? Just as Brother Jew was thinking, on the other side, the battle between the 3 Blackbeard Pirates officers and Wong Long had reached a critical moment. But Chapter 1322. In the blink of an eye, Blackbeard's 3 officers gradually gained the upper hand in the battle. After all, Vulture, Nezru, and Marthiknek were all from the same pirate ship. Furthermore, they were all veterans. As long as the 3 of them worked together, it wouldn't be difficult for them to take care of a dragon of this size. Of course, this development was also within Brother Jew's expectations. Although Wong Long was strong, it was only a monster, after all, while Blackbeard's subordinates were all NPCs with higher intelligence. In the main universe, the former was equivalent to animals, while the latter was equivalent to humans. No matter how smart an animal was, it might not be as smart as the stupidest human. This was the difference in the quality of a creature's level. Humans could learn knowledge, use tools, use strategies, and plan to train their physical strength and skills. As for animals, it was already very difficult to achieve any of these. Not long after, the 3 pirates used the nibble tactic to take down Wong Long. The alien beast let out an unwilling cry as it fell to the ground. For it, being killed by 3 creatures weaker than itself was really a grievance. Fortunately, Marthiknek quickly slashed at Wong Long's neck, cutting off the latter's depression and pain. It took more time than I thought. Seeing that the battle was over, Fong Bujue said sarcastically and walked forward again. If you want to come down and help yourself. Mr. Volger did not hold back. Even if the other party was Brother Jew, he would still speak frankly. Ha, I want it too. Fong Bujue smiled and replied halfway. Then he pointed at Mad Eye beside him. But someone has to look after Captain Mad Eye, right? Isn't his strength already restricted? At this moment, Snow, who walked over with Blackbeard, muttered softly in a timely manner. In the face of this act of sabotage, Brother Jew still looked very indifferent. After all, he was thick-skinned. Yes, he is restricted, but you're not restricted, right? Fong Bujue skillfully used the method of secretly changing the concept and counterattacking. He said, "Why don't you go up?" Okay. I won't say anything, okay? Snow was also a smart person. He knew very well that if he took advantage of the situation and argued with Brother Jew, he would definitely lose. So he chose to admit defeat directly and stop talking about this topic. Since you're done, let's not waste any more time. At this moment, Blackbeard, who was the most reliable, commanded, "Thick Neck, go and see if your brother is dead. If he's not, get him to get up quickly." Yes. Mark's neck was extremely thick. He walked quickly to the place where Mark's hoof was lying down. In fact, Thick Neck had always known that his brother was not dead. That was because the two brothers had some sort of connection. If one of them died, the other would know. Sure enough, after being shaken a few times, Mark Hoof woke up from his coma. "What? Is it time to eat?" Hoof asked as soon as he opened his eyes. "If you're hungry, there's a whole dragon over there for you to eat." Thick Neck was also an honest man. "Eat a skewer." The next second, Mr. Volger, who had a sharp tongue and a sharp heart, scolded the two fools. The ravenous dragon is a typical corrosive creature. It's the most thoroughly corroded among the low-level dragons. The reason why they are much smaller than other dragons is that they have almost no meat. There's only a thin layer of fat in their huge skeleton and skin that's as thick as a city wall. It's this layer of fat. Like their internal organs and blood, it's poisonous. I see. Just as Mr. Volger was explaining, Fong Bujue had already picked up Bell's daily knife and cut open the dragon's abdominal cavity for observation. The result of severe corruption is that it has gained considerable strength and a ferocious character, but has lost the wisdom and magic ability that dragons should have. Even the basic ability of spitting fire has been lost because of the body's mutation. Hey, don't tell me you want to cut some parts from this thing as snacks? At this moment, Hong Hu's sharp mind made him think of a rather bad hypothesis. No, I'm just curious. When Fong Bujue replied, he had already stood up from the dragon's corpse with a smile on his face. This guy's words and actions were both true and false. Even though Hong Hu and Snow were his teammates, they really did not know what he was thinking. Hoof, how's your injury? On the other side, Blackbeard did not care about Brother Jew. Instead, he walked up to his subordinate and asked, It's just that when I caught that tail just now, it was too strenuous. I couldn't catch my breath and then suffocated. I'm fine now." When Mark Hoof replied, he had already stood up. His half-orc bloodline had a self-healing ability. For a hard injury like this, he had already recovered when he was lying on the ground. "Very good. Then let's continue on our way," Blackbeard said as he turned his head and glanced at Mad Eye. "Oomph." Mad Eye met Blackbeard's gaze and snorted coldly. He walked forward unhurriedly and said, "Understood. I'll walk in front." Mad Eye. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Blackbeard's tone suddenly turned cold. "Don't think that you're fooling around with others. There won't be a next time." As soon as this was said, the cold smile on Mad Eye's face froze. After a slight hesitation, a strange look flashed in his eyes. Then, the expression on his face became serious. He walked to the front of the team without saying a word and began to silently lead the way. Fong Bujue observed the words and actions of the two and laughed in his heart. In this suddenly oppressive atmosphere, the 9 people set off again. The figures in the forest who were following them did not give up because of the disturbance just now. They continued to follow them from afar. They did not speak a word along the way. It was so quiet that it was suffocating for 20 minutes. Finally, the group passed through the dense forest and came to an open area. If what was happening on this island was compared to a jigsaw puzzle, then what was reflected in the eyes of the 9 people at this time was probably a piece of the puzzle. This is an altar. Hong Hu looked at the small, stair-like hexagonal pyramid in front of him and blurted out a simple and intuitive conclusion. The various traces in the forest were undoubtedly left behind when they were transporting construction materials, Snow said thoughtfully. Then the question is, who is this altar dedicated to? Well, it's not the 2 founders of the Phantom Demon Church. Before Snow's voice died away, Brother Jew, who had the most right to speak on this matter, spoke up. Sam Montier and Talium never used this kind of ancient Orthodox religion, most of which were tied to tribes, countries, and races, had a certain political color, and had relatively open doctrines, to collect the power of faith. They used the secret society method. Hold on, Hong Hu said to Brother Jew at this time. Now that things have come to this, are you still sure that the enemies around us are from the Phantom Demon Church? Although I don't know them as well as you do, I can see that their way of doing things is completely different from the members of the Phantom Demon Church I've met before. Of course, I've noticed this too. Feng Bujua paused and said, what I can be sure of is these people, at least, were once warlocks of the Phantom Demon Church. The origin of magic in their bodies is a kind of identification mark that can't be changed. It's just, I'm not too sure why these people on this island are doing so many strange things. It's not strange that you don't know. 2 seconds later, Blackbeard suddenly spoke again. After all, you're just a traveler from another world. Your knowledge is limited. As he spoke, he walked forward alone and approached the altar in front of them. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Just as Blackbeard stepped into the 10-meter radius of the altar, many small defensive circles were activated. For a moment, there was a sweeping sound of magic light around them. Even I haven't seen this in a long time. Blackbeard's tone was still calm, and his footsteps were steady. This was because the energy that he unconsciously leaked out and surrounded his body was enough to offset the attacks. You know what that is? Feng Bujua heard him and asked. This is the altar of the god of wisdom, Wisten. When Blackbeard replied, he was already standing in front of the altar. Mad-Eye. After pausing for a second, Blackbeard said without turning his head, you still remember, right? The despicable person who killed the queen. Chapter 1323. Do you still need to ask? At this moment, a trace of sorrow flashed across Mad-Eye's face. Every pirate in the Chaos Ocean will never forget. Do you mind if I ask, what are you talking about? Feng Bujua was a curious person, so he asked that question. However, the 2 pirates did not seem to have any intention of answering him. It has nothing to do with you. Mad-Eye only said these 4 words. At this moment, Blackbeard had already unsheathed the sword of Triton from his waist. He poured his strength into the blade and slashed down. Even the group of people standing more than 10 meters behind Blackbeard could feel the pressure of this attack. It was impossible for the defensive magic circle of the altar not to react. Unfortunately, it was useless even if it reacted. In front of Blackbeard's strength, the magic energy contained in the magic circle only lasted for a second before collapsing. When the formation dissipated, this altar, which was only made of wood and stone from a physical point of view, could not withstand a single blow. Thus, with a series of rumbling sounds, the altar of the god of wisdom, Wisten, was reduced to ruins. Looking at the scene before them, the 8 people in the distance were silent. They were all quietly waiting for Blackbeard to say something or do something. However, what they waited for was, your actions are exactly as I expected. A voice that was very unfamiliar to the players sounded from the smoke that had yet to disperse. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice, and soon they saw a blue teleportation portal that was gradually taking shape. You pirates really haven't changed. You're still so rude and rude. When the second sentence was said, an old man wearing a wizard's white robe, with a shammate hairstyle and a long staff in his hand, walked out of the teleportation portal. "You haven't changed much either." Blackbeard looked at him and replied coldly. "You're still that hypocritical and disgusting person." "Humph." Wisden snorted coldly. "Blackbeard, I don't want to argue with you. I'm just here to invite you." As he spoke, he looked at the 8 people behind him. "And your subordinates, leave Devil Chomp Island." "When did you become the master of Devil Chomp Island?" The tone of Blackbeard's reply was more indicative than the content of his words. He was not the kind of person who could be asked to leave. As everyone knows, the master of Devil Chomp Island is the master of time. Wisden, on the other hand, was very calm. He said, "Of course, he is now dead. Logically speaking, a certain officer should take over this island." He shrugged and said with a smile, "Unfortunately, the officers under him were not that good. Other than the few who were replaced and the traitors, the rest of the officers were killed by an otherworldly traveler by the name of Phantom Dawn." Although Wisden had been on intimate terms with several of his contemporaries, his manner in describing the incident was one of mockery. Blackbeard had not been exaggerating when he called him hypocritical. Since the Master of Time and his direct subordinates are all dead, then, as his former ally, it wouldn't be inappropriate for me to take over Devil Chomp Island, would it? As Wisden spoke, he tapped the long staff in his hand. Instantly, a wave of magic energy that was not that strong rippled through the air. Several seconds later, there was a rustling sound from the forest around the clearing. Moments later, a large group of sorcerers from the Phantom Demon Church, who were dressed in the same way as the captive earlier, with their mouths sewn shut, appeared at the edge of the clearing and surrounded it. Hong Hu scanned the area as fast as he could. He estimated the number of enemies and realized there were 120 of them. He could not help but think, if these people opened their mouths at the same time, the situation would be much scarier than if they worked together to set up an explosion circle. "What did you say?" Blackbeard did not care about these small fries. He was more interested in the information in Wisden's words. "You are the Master of Time's ally." When he asked that, Blackbeard turned back to glance at Mad Eye. "How come I hear that you are enemies with the other 8 gods and 4 pillars of divinity?" "Huh? That was then, and this is now," Wisden said. "Indeed, when the era of the 4 pillars of divinity had just arrived, we had some disagreements with them over the issue of power. When dealing with these disagreements, we paid a price." He paused, but later I thought it through. The rise of the 4 pillars of divinity is destiny. Even we, the 9 gods, cannot go against it. So, I chose to go with the flow of the times. After I returned from another dimension, I contacted the Master of Time and became his ally. "Oh." As soon as Wisden finished speaking, Brother Jew on the other side used a strange tone to take over the conversation. "To put it simply, you and your 8 brothers wanted to split the territory with the 4 pillars of divinity. In the end, after a group fight, 4 of you were killed. You and the other 4 survived, fled, and hid in another dimension. After a few years, you understood the principle of since you can't defeat the other side, you join the other side. You snuck back and found the Master of Time, who belongs to the same faction as you, and knelt down as a dog. There shouldn't be a problem with what I said, right?" Indeed, there was nothing wrong with Feng Buju's analysis. It was basically the same as the truth, but what he said was the exact opposite of Wisden's glossed-over words. It was too unpleasant to listen to. This was the first time Wisden had met Brother Jew, and naturally, it was the first time he had experienced this level of cheap power. After a round of mockery, his hands were already shaking. "A mere traveler from another dimension. How dare you speak so arrogantly, huh? A mere traveler from another dimension?" Feng Bujue repeated Wisden's words and laughed arrogantly. "After all, you're a lesser god. It's fine if you can't tell my strength, but you don't even know what I look like. Looks like you've really been raised like a dog all these years, ah." At this time, the rather black-bellied Hong Hu added, "That's to be expected. The Master of Time is not a fool. He definitely won't put an ambitious general like this in an important position. Using the excuse of taking in him, He put him under house arrest in his territory and found someone to monitor and control him. That's the best plan. The two of them echoed each other and completely infuriated Wisden because their reasoning was accurate and every word and sentence poked at Wisden's sore spot. Although Wisden said that he and the Master of Time were allies, the truth was seen through by Brother Jew. He had only taken the initiative to look for the Master of Time to return to the main universe and expressed his willingness to work for you. As for the Master of Time's thoughts, just like what Honghu had said, he would never trust a guy like Wisden. But as the Pillar God of the Order faction, when faced with a Master of Time who had turned from the dark to the light, he could not chase away or kill him. Could he? It would not sound good if word got out. Therefore, the Master of Time put Wisden under house arrest in the chronograph city. The city where the chronographs were located was different from the chronograph domain where the Master of Time himself was, and gave him the nominal position of manager, but did not give him any real power or authority. Over the years, Wisden had basically been doing nothing in Time City. Today, he would go to this Time officer's house to play chess, and the next day, he would go to another Time officer's cave to dance. With the Master of Time's order, the Time officers tried their best not to mention anything about the outside world to Wisden in case he did something strange after receiving the news. And naturally, they would not leak the news of Wisden's return to the main universe to the outside world. Then, Thriller Paradise opened, and the main universe entered a new era. With the combined effort of the players and the anomalies, the number of Time officers dwindled. Finally, one day, Time City became an empty city, but Wisden was still restricted by the barriers set up by the Master of Time, and he could not leave this space. It was not until the day of Ragnarok that the barrier disappeared. Wisden understood that this was the signal of the Master of Time's death, and from that moment on, he had truly returned to this world. How dare you? Back to the present. After Wisden was exposed by the two players, the anger that had been bottled up for years was brought out. When a person had endured for so many years and finally made a name for himself, to expose his old wounds, it was very easy for him to go on a rampage. As the "how dare you" left his mouth, Wisden raised his staff, and a large fireball about 3 meters in diameter formed instantly. It flew toward Brother Jew. Chapter 1324. Fireball. Feng Bujue didn't need to look at the data to recognize the spell that his opponent was using. He put on a look of disdain. It was true that Fireball was a very good offensive spell. Its destructive power, attack speed, and range of effect were all quite impressive. If the spellcaster was strong enough, he could add a lot of changes to this spell. However, in front of Brother Jew, this kind of attack would not be able to cause any damage. Because, good timing. Just as Brother Jew said this, something appeared in his hand, the Heaven Spirit Earth Fiend box. Bang! At the same time, the fireball flew in front of Brother Jew and exploded suddenly. As a Grandmaster Mage, Wisden could naturally do something with this spell. So, in order to ensure that he could hit the target, he took the initiative to detonate the fireball about half a second in advance. This spell would only explode after coming into contact with a certain volume of solid objects. In an instant, the blazing fire engulfed Brother Jew and everything within a radius of 5 meters. The people who were standing near Feng Bujue reacted quickly. They had all scattered when the fireball flew over. Nezra didn't forget to pull Mad Eye away. As for Honghu and Snow, it wasn't that they didn't want to help their teammate, but they thought that with Feng Bujue's speed and reaction, it would be easy for him to dodge this kind of attack. But the result was, Brother Jew didn't move from his spot. Oomph! Looking at the burning fire, Wisden sneered and said through gritted teeth, "Reckless fool, it's too late for regrets now." Unexpectedly, before he could finish speaking, there was a sudden change. With a whoosh, the large ball of fire suddenly shrunk like a ball of hair being sucked away by a vacuum cleaner and disappeared in a few seconds. When the fire disappeared, Feng Bujue's figure appeared again. The magical fire had been sucked into a strange dodecahedron in his hand. Seeing that Brother Jew was unharmed, Wisden was puzzled. Then, his expression changed. I didn't expect you to have such a good magic weapon. Just as the NPC finished speaking, Snow threw a question at Brother Jew from afar. Hey, since you have a tool that can absorb magic attacks, why didn't you use it when we were being attacked? The magic arrows were too weak to absorb, and the explosion spell was too strong to absorb all. Feng Bujue's answer was concise and comprehensive and reasonable. All right, Snow shrugged, showing a non-committal expression. I see. That. The explosion spell can't be dispelled, right? Thank you for telling me. Wisten raised the long staff in his hand after hearing this. Do you think I'm dead? Seeing that the other party was about to unleash a powerful attack, Blackbeard, who was closest to Wisten, naturally would not stand by and watch. He took a big stride forward, and as he spoke, he struck out with his sword. However, this sword strike missed. Where the blade passed, a wave of black energy rolled out diagonally, causing a few warlocks from the Phantom Fiend Church who were more than 10 meters away to die. As for Wisten, when the other party attacked, he had already cast a flash spell. With a buzzing sound, he teleported in front of Feng Bujue. Kid, try absorbing my physical attack. The moment Wisten appeared, he taunted and attacked at the same time. After all, he was the god of wisdom. It was normal for him to use some tricks in battle. Now, Wisten was using his words and actions to mislead his opponent into thinking that he was about to cast a powerful spell like the explosion spell. This was to hide his real intention of using his staff to hit people. It had to be said that this was a brilliant move. At least, it had fooled most of the people present. As one of the 9 gods who had once dominated the Chaos Sea, Wisden's mana was definitely strong enough to instantly cast a large-scale explosion array. Thus, when Blackbeard saw that he was about to unleash a big move, he had to be on guard. However, there was another fact that was easily overlooked. Wisden's physical strength was also very high. In the system's settings, secondary gods were on the same level as the Count of Script and Genli King. Although Brother Zun and Old Wong were among the most powerful among the secondary gods, and Wisten was no match for them. With his physical ability, it was more than enough to kill 1 or 2 players with one hit. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, Wisden's staff had already fallen through the wind. The speed, power, and suddenness of this attack were enough to kill a normal player. Unfortunately, not bad. Interesting. Feng Bujue used a very small movement and took a step back, easily dodging the surprise attack. In a calm tone, he said, "If I hadn't predicted that you would teleport to hit me, I might not have been able to dodge in time. How dare you?" Seeing this, Wisten raised his staff and swept horizontally. This time, Brother Jew was more relaxed. His upper body did not even move. With a light jump, he jumped over the opponent's attack. As he jumped, he said, "Whoa, what's going on? Melee mage? Learning from Gandalf? Saruman?" Just as Brother Jew was complaining, Wisden's attack missed, and he followed up with another attack. He waved his staff in a half circle and then pushed it to the ground. This attack came from above, and it came from the tail of the staff. The attack range was very small. Feng Bujue only took half a step back to evade it, but when he took that half a step, he noticed a problem. Oh? When Brother Jew realized that he could not move his body, 3 words came out of his mouth. Fixing spell. As the name suggested, it was a type of imprisonment spell. The activation requirements were not too strict. It required the spellcaster to imbue a physical object, usually a throwing knife or a short sword, with mana, and then insert it into the target's shadow. Once the spell was cast, the target whose shadow was fixed would also be fixed. Of course, the person who was fixed was not completely immobile, but almost immobile. If one was strong enough, they could make small movements very slowly. In addition, speaking would not be affected by the fixing spell, because when a person spoke, their shadow would not change. It's useless to see through it now. As Wisten spoke, he let go of his staff. The fixing spell would lose its effect if he pulled it out and punched Brother Jew's head. However, he still didn't succeed. Hiss! Just as Wisden's fist was about to land, A ferocious light flashed past and sliced off the arm he was using to punch. It seems like you really think I'm dead. The next second, Blackbeard appeared beside Wystan, sword in hand. "WH. Why?" Wystan looked at his arm in shock and muttered, "How did you— It's not quite what you expected, right?" Blackbeard said as he swung his sword a second time. Wystan quickly pulled out his staff from the ground to block it, but the sword cut off both his staff and his neck. "You really don't deserve to be called the god of wisdom." Blackbeard looked at the head that was drawing a parabola in the air and sneered. "You didn't even notice what the Lord of Time had done to you, and you couldn't wait to appear in front of opponents that you didn't have the confidence to defeat." At this moment, Wystan seemed to realize something. Half a sentence flashed through his mind. Could it be? Then his train of thought was cut off forever. "Phew!" Looking at the head that had fallen to the ground, Fong Bujua sighed. "That was close." Then he looked at Blackbeard. "Thank you, Captain, for your help." "Don't play dumb," Blackbeard interrupted. "Even if I didn't do anything, you could have dealt with it all the same. I just couldn't be bothered to watch you play anymore." He paused and looked into the distance. "Now, instead of that idiot who has no idea that time has been stolen, why don't you think about how to deal with these people around you?" Before Blackbeard finished speaking, the warlocks of the Phantom Fiend Church had already raised their hands and, expressionlessly, tore open their sewn mouths with their fingers. Chapter 1325. TSK. Suicide Attack. Seeing the actions of the group of believers, Mr. Volger squeezed this sentence out from between his teeth. Fong Bujua's focus was not on this. Something's not right. The followers of the Phantom Demon Church are not the kind of people who would sacrifice unconditionally for their beliefs. That kind of thing doesn't matter. Hong Hu continued, "What I'm concerned about now is that in about a minute, we will be surrounded by nearly 100 raging dragons. What should we do?" "You have to leave this place." The next second, Blackbeard took the initiative to answer this question. He used the word must instead of the best in this sentence. Just this point alone had made the three players realize something. Fong Bujua laughed immediately. "Captain, are you going to do something big? No matter what I'm going to do, you will only get in my way if you stay here." Blackbeard replied bluntly. Then he looked at Nezru and said, "Nezru, bring them up to the sky. I will come down after I've dealt with these bastards." "Yes," Nezru responded and then turned to the crowd. "Guys, you heard that, right? Gather around me." Although the players were not very sure what this guy was going to do, they still did it because the situation around them did not allow them to delay any longer. Everyone. 10 seconds later, when the 7 people except Blackbeard had all gathered around Nezru and stood still, Nezru opened his mouth again. "Watch your feet." Before Brother Jew could ask, "Pay attention to your feet. What are you doing?" His feet had already left the ground. At that moment, he only heard a strange pop sound in his ears. When he came back to his senses, he was already flying into the sky like a rocket. When he was in the air, Hong Hu, who was in a relatively static state with Fong Bujua, took the opportunity to ask him, "What's the trick?" Hong Hu asked this because he knew that Fong Bujua could analyze the skill by looking through the data. Brother Jew had no intention of hiding anything from his teammates. He lowered his head to look at the data stream and replied, With the user as the center, the user will turn the ground within a radius of a few meters into a trampoline-like substance. The moment the skill is activated, the creature standing on the surface of the trampoline will be bounced up and gradually become weightless. After that, the creature will fly towards outer space at a very slow speed until it escapes the planet's gravity or the caster terminates the effect of the skill. Hey, hearing this, Snow could not help but interrupt. "Isn't this ability a little too IMBA? It's all right. It's not as useful as you think." Fong Bujua continued, "Because the spellcaster will fly with the enemy. That is to say, if he wants to throw the enemy into outer space, then he will follow." Just like that, the three of them discussed each other's abilities before Nezru. Regarding this, Nezru and the rest were not too surprised. After all, the name Fong Bujua was now a legendary presence in the main universe. From other people's perspective, His identity was similar to the devil incarnate Blackbeard. For a devil like him, to be able to see through other people's abilities was normal. On the other hand, at the same time these 8 ascended, Blackbeard's dragon-slaying operation started. He did not unleash the ultimate like Feng Buju expected. He just very normally held his Triton sword and used the most basic close-quarter combat method to slay the raging dragons one by one. Looking down from the sky, Blackbeard seemed to be playing the role of One Piece's invincible pirate in the midst of a bunch of monsters. Facing the powerful creature, Raging Dragon, which was known for its physical combat ability, Blackbeard maintained the efficiency of harvesting wheat. Compared to the twists and turns it took the 3 cadres to kill the Raging Dragon, Blackbeard's unfathomable strength was really mind-numbing. By the way, Mad Eye, after watching for a while, Feng Buju's attention moved away from the battlefield below. He turned to talk to Mad Eye, who was flying up with him. Just now, Blackbeard said that Wistin is the despicable man who killed the queen. What did he mean by that? Didn't I say that has nothing to do with you? Mad Eye's answer was the same as before. Huh, I was just asking out of curiosity. Feng Buju replied with a smile. Actually, I don't mind telling you, Mr. Volger interjected. At this time, Mr. Volger interjected, and his tone revealed a hint of sadness. That is just an old scar buried in the hearts of us old pirates. Oh, Brother Buju took the opportunity to continue. I'd like to hear more. Mr. Volger pondered for a moment before continuing. Many years ago, when Blackbeard, Mad Eye, and, of course, me, when our generation was still young, there was a pirate who had successfully dominated the Sea of Chaos. He paused for half a second before continuing. She was the one and only pirate queen recognized by all pirates on this sea. Even Captain Blackbeard in his heyday was not like her. She could make everyone revere and submit to her. There are even many people who joined the pirate trade purely for the opportunity to catch a glimpse of her beauty at sea. No one knew her real age, name, or where she came from, but we all heard her name as a pirate, Queen Anna. Hearing this, the 3 players instantly reacted and asked the same question in unison. The Anna from Queen Anna's Revenge? Mr. Vald paused and replied, yes. It's what you think it means. His tone was very low, just like his mood when he recalled this past. Like the fate of the rise of the 4 pillar gods, the 9 gods also had their own era, and the person who blocked the tide of that era was Anna. Back then, she led the most powerful pirate alliance in the Sea of Chaos and fought against the 9 gods who had just entered the Sea of Chaos. In terms of strength, the 2 sides should be evenly matched, but in terms of strategy, not every pirate captain was so smart. Under the instigation of Wistin, 2 pirate groups who were usually at odds began to stand by and preserve their strength. This was the fuse, triggering the internal collapse of the entire alliance. At this point, the battle was completely tilted towards the 9 gods. Anna saw that the defeat was certain, so she decided to sacrifice herself. She stayed alone on the Queen's Pirates' pursuer to resist the 9 gods and cover the retreat of the defeated alliance. It wasn't until they fled in panic that the pirate alliance realized their stupidity and mistake. But at that time, Anna and the pursuer had already fallen under the joint attack of the 9 gods and sank to the bottom of the sea. At this point, Mad Eye finally couldn't hold back his anger anymore. He continued Volger's words. After that, after a few years, Blackbeard's forces rose to prominence. That guy thought he was the one who had recently taken over the throne, so he went to pick up the wreckage of the pursuer and rebuild a pirate ship on the indestructible dragon bones of the ship and named it Queen Anna's Revenge. What was the result? Did he take revenge on the 9 gods? No, he just used the name of the queen to constantly strengthen his strength and collect treasures on the Chaos Sea. Until the era of the 4 pillar gods came. He simply ran to the end of the chaos out of fear and hid until now. Madman, the captain is not what you said. Mr. Volger interrupted Madman. Don't talk nonsense if you don't understand. Bah. Even though he was a prisoner, Madman did not back down. You'd better save this kind of bullshit for the rookies who just boarded your ship. Who do you think I am? Just as the two were quarreling, suddenly, there was another change. At that moment, a dark purple beam of light shot up from the night and dyed the sea under the reflection of the blood moon into a more demonic color. What is it this time? Honghu turned his head and looked at the root of the beam of light. The location of the explosion was on the South Island, opposite the North Island they were on. Something is coming. 2 seconds later, Feng Bujua, who was also looking in that direction, said something similar to Wistin, but far more powerful. Chapter 1326. On the other hand, on the South Island, the place where the purple pillar of light appeared was also the location of an altar. At this time, the mysterious person called Master by Mad Eye, who was 23, who was hidden in the cloak, was standing beside the altar and watching the scene quietly. There were 4 people standing on both sides of her. The first one was the mute man, Ivan. The second one was a cyclops who was several times larger than Ivan. His skin was the color of dirt. The third one was a white-haired knight who had a resolute face and a burly body. The fourth one was a necromancer who was half human and half ghost and had a lifeless aura. As for Ivan, I won't go into too much detail here. Let's talk about the cyclops and the white-haired knight. The 2 of them were also mentioned in the previous chapter. They were the god of folly, Idiante, and the god of truth, Turius, of the 9 gods. As for the last necromancer, his name was Crone. He was the confidant of Soul's Nature in the Phantom Demon Church. In terms of strength, he was second only to Sam Montier, Taliome, and Soul's Nature. Who is it? How dare you summon me here? When the purple light dissipated, a strange figure emerged from the light pillar and walked up the steps of the altar as he spoke. When these words were spoken, the appearance of this person was revealed to everyone. From his appearance, this person was obviously a member of the Satyr race, which was Sam Montier's race. However, his appearance was a little different from Sam Montier's. It could be said that he was inferior. In any case, he didn't look as intimidating as Sam Montier, but he felt more corrupt and sinister. The god of lies, Ifo, 23, didn't use her processed voice at this moment. Instead, she used her own voice to speak. As expected of the strongest of the 9 gods, your sacrificial ritual consumed all the remaining cannon fodder under my command. When she said this, Ifo also noticed that there was a circle of fresh, bloody corpses around the altar under his feet. In the next second, Ifo's gaze stopped on Idiante and Turius. Then he said, "Why are the 2 of you here?" "The torrent of the times brought us back," Turius replied without hesitation. The god of truth was wearing a set of golden knight armor. His ridiculously large sword was inserted into the ground in front of him like a tombstone. "The 4 pillar gods have all fallen. Master, she will lead us back to our former glory," Idiante added in a timely manner. The god of foolishness was wearing leather armor made from the bones of behemoths. On his shoulder, he carried a spiked hammer that was thicker than a telephone pole. "Master," upon hearing this, Ifo immediately shifted his gaze to 23. He stared at the mysterious man in the cloak for a few moments before he sneered. "Humph. It seems like my 2 brothers have been recruited by you. I hope you can join as well." Number 23 went straight to the point. Ifo was still sneering. "If I'm willing to submit to others, why would I leave this universe in the first place? Ifo, I advise you not to reject Master's kindness." Turius continued, "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." "Yes, Ifo," Idiante added, "you can also feel how powerful Master is, right? If we follow her, we can achieve more than before." "That's enough." Ifo did not intend to listen to them. He interrupted, "I'm not interested in talking nonsense with the 2 of you." He spread out his hands. "One is a hypocritical villain, and the other is a greedy fool. When I was defeated by the 4 pillar gods, I had completely given up on the 2 of you. The reason why I didn't immediately fall out with the 2 of you was that I needed your strength to open the passage to the other world." Upon hearing this, Turius and Idiante's expressions turned ugly. If it were any other day, they would have flipped out. However, Today, with the presence of 23, even these two NPCs with the title of God did not dare to act rashly. Woman. After Ifo finished mocking his two brothers, he immediately looked at 23 and said, I don't know who you are, and I don't want to know, but I don't mind telling you that over the years my thoughts have changed. I don't want to return to this universe anymore, and everything here has nothing to do with me. As he said this, he turned around and walked toward the last purple light at the top of the altar. Anyway, you have already found two capable dogs. Just pretend that I've never been here. He still had one or two words to say, but he stopped abruptly at this point. This was because in that instant, number 23's hand had already pierced through his back and through his chest. Okay, I'll pretend that you've never been here. In the next second, 23's girlish and slightly mischievous tone suddenly sounded in Ifo's ears. Ifo lowered his head and saw a stream of data emitting a golden light. It spread out from his wound like liquid and engulfed his entire body at an astonishing speed. Before Ifo could say anything, he was engulfed by the golden light. His power was also absorbed by 23 after this formatting. Silence, a chilling silence. The scene before them caused the four people below the altar to break out in cold sweat. The energy is stronger than I thought. I can't say that it's a waste of time, right? 23 muttered after she finished absorbing. Then, a stream of data flashed in her eyes. This process lasted for about 5 seconds. Sigh. So this is the result. No one knew what she saw, but 5 seconds later, her pupils returned to normal, and she sighed. Then, 23 turned around and said to the four people under the altar, just now, Wistin and the Warlock troop have been wiped out. If nothing goes wrong, Blackbeard and the others will soon head to the island in the middle to open the treasure. Do you have any orders? Crone asked tentatively. I only have one mission for you, 23 replied. A simple and straightforward mission. Her tone was firm, but the expression hidden under her hood was quite complicated. As long as you complete it, I'll reward you handsomely. You can even become one of the 4 pillar gods. Please tell us. When Turius heard that there was such a good thing, he immediately knelt on one knee and asked loudly, We'll go through fire and water to... There's a traveler from another world beside Blackbeard. His name is Fongbujua. I want you to find him and kill him at all costs. She paused for half a second to control her fluctuating tone and emotions. I don't care what kind of method you use, but you have to be fast. Once he transforms into white light and leaves this universe, your mission will be considered completed. That's right, Fongbujua said. I want you to find him and kill him at all costs. She paused for half a second to control her fluctuating tone and emotions. Chapter 13:27. At the same time, in the sky above North Island. Fongbujua, who was still ascending in the air, noticed something, and his expression immediately changed. What's wrong? Hong, who saw that Brother Ju's expression was strange, so he asked. I don't know why the guy that came out of the light pillar, its energy suddenly disappeared, Fongbujua replied. Could it be it went back to another universe through the light pillar? Snow immediately speculated. It's possible, Fongbujua muttered. Of course, it could also be it's also possible. Hong, who continued his sentence and said, the one that came was like Wistin, killed by a more powerful existence. Just as the three of them were talking, Nezru, who was at the highest point, said, Everyone get ready to go down. As he said that, he reached out to grab Mad Eye. Almost at the same time that he grabbed Mad Eye, the weightlessness on everyone suddenly disappeared. Then, the 8 people in the air stopped floating and fell to the ground. Hey, do we have to find a way to land ourselves? The others were fine, but Snow did not have any means to fall from a height of hundreds of meters without any injuries. Fortunately, Fongbujua had already foreseen this. The moment the fall began, he had already used Jeppo and moved behind Snow. Before Snow could finish his sentence, Brother Ju had already reached out to grab his arm. With Fongbujua's help, Snow would not fall to his death. Just like that, 10 seconds later, Blackbeard's 4 subordinates, 3 players and Mad Eye landed safely one after another using their own methods. When they landed, the originally spacious open space was filled with the corpses of raging dragons. At this moment, Blackbeard stood on a corpse mound made up of dragon corpses. The Triton sword in his hand was already stained with dirty dragon blood, but on his body and clothes, there was not a single drop of blood. From this alone, it could be seen that he, like most of the high-ranking NPCs, had some kind of passive, very strong, and reliable protective aura. "Ha! Captain, you've worked hard." As soon as they landed, Fong Bujua smiled and said to Blackbeard, "This level is at most a warm-up," Blackbeard replied casually. Blackbeard responded casually and immediately asked, "By the way, did something happen in the south just now?" "I'm not too sure," Fong Bujue replied. "It seems that another 9 gods was summoned from another world, and then suddenly disappeared." "Seems?" Blackbeard looked doubtful. He repeated the 2 words and said, "Can't you find out what's going on over there?" "Yes," Fong Bujue said. "My perceptive range cannot cover that far." "Wait." At this moment, Snow asked again, "Then how do you know that 9 gods appeared and disappeared on the other side of the light pillar?" "Although that light pillar is not within my perception range, it has entered my field of vision," Fong Bujua said. "I can naturally give a general idea of what happened when I saw something directly." He was telling the truth, not bluffing. Because the purple light pillar was summoned by this sacrificial ritual, its energy source was very closely related to Ifo. Therefore, when Fong Bujua observed the light pillar through the data perspective, he could capture Ifo's data flow from it. However, the moment Ifo was killed in 23 seconds, his data suddenly disappeared from the light pillar. This was also the reason why Brother Ju was puzzled earlier. Another 9 gods. Blackbeard thought for a moment, then looked at the collapsed altar nearby and said, "From the current situation, this group of Phantom Demon Church no doubt has mastered the method to summon the 9 gods from another world, and they have already put it into action. That means," Mr. Vyoji continued, "other than Wistin, for the 5 9 gods who escaped to another world are likely to have arrived on Devil's Chomp Island." At this moment, Fong Bujua said in a rather strange but confident tone, "Let me correct you. It can't be 4, there are at most 3. Blackbeard heard something from his tone and asked, "Why do you say that?" "I don't know about the other gods." Fong Bujua said, "Anyway, that god of wandering, Walker, was already dead when I came to Devil's Chomp Island last time." "Oh." Blackbeard raised an eyebrow and asked, "You killed him?" Fong Bujua thought for a second. "I worked together with a few others." As he spoke, he raised his finger and pointed at Hong Hu. This Minister Tezuka was also involved. "If you really want to make fun of me, just call me Rain Dragon." Hong Hu was too lazy to complain about Brother Ju's way of addressing him. "Are you sure he's dead?" At this time, Mad Eye, who was standing behind them, interrupted. "Walker is a master ranger. Disguise, stealth, and fake death are all his specialties. We roasted him and ate him." A second later, Fong Bujua added. Mad Eye nodded. "Forget I asked." In other words, hearing this, Blackbeard continued in a concluding tone, "We have to face at most 3 opponents of the 9 gods level." "Maybe," Fong Bujue responded and then laughed. "Ha! But from the way you killed Wistin, even if it's 1 against 3, it's not a problem, right?" "That was just an exception," Blackbeard replied in a low voice. During the years when Wistin was under house arrest in Shurji City, the Master of Time must have been secretly stealing his time, and Wistin himself did not realize it at all. So, until I cut off his head, he realized that his power was close to exhaustion. "But the other 9 gods are not so easy to deal with, right?" Snow asked, following Blackbeard's meaning. Blackbeard did not immediately answer this question. Instead, he slowly raised his head and looked at the sky. Just as he was silent, from the distant night sky, there was a strange sound of wind breaking. "We will find out soon." As the sound got closer, Blackbeard opened his mouth and muttered to himself. At this moment, the expressions of the players, Mr. Volger, Nezru, the Mark brothers, and Mad Eye all changed. This was because they all noticed that 3 figures had flown directly from the sky in the south. Chapter 1328. Don't be nervous, Mr. Captain. As soon as Tullius landed, he immediately looked at Blackbeard and said, "We're not here for you." Huh. As soon as Tullius said this, Fongbujua laughed dryly at the top of his voice. This was because he read the subtext of this sentence in an instant. We're here for Fongbujua. Actually, it was not only him. Everyone else present was well aware of this as well. Who asked you to treat other people's companions as if they were food? Let me see. Blackbeard's attitude was still very calm. His gaze swept across the faces of the newcomers one by one as he slowly muttered, Tullius, Ediani, and a guy who's half human and half ghost. He paused and sneered. I'm very confused. What made you think that the few of you are enough to make me feel nervous? The meaning of his words was also very obvious. The 3 of you are all weaker than me, so don't be too arrogant when you talk to me. Mr. Captain, we didn't mean to offend you. At this time, Crone, whose status was relatively lower, spoke up. Actually, there's no reason for us to be enemies. But that companion of yours, Wistin, doesn't seem to think so. Upon hearing this, Honghu immediately followed up with this sentence, afraid that he would not be able to stir up trouble. Ah, that guy. Kron responded with ease. Indeed, this northern island is a territory that Master gave to Wistin. He paused for half a second and changed the topic. However, the magic circles on the island were all set up by Wistin on his own accord. The attack on you was also his own decision. As he said this, he turned his head slightly and accurately found Wisden's body among the corpses and blood all over the ground. Now that he's dead, you can say that he reaped what he sowed. But the followers of the Phantom Demon Church under him are your people, right? Snow was also very good at leading the conversation. The magic that these guys cast caused considerable casualties on our side. Those people, Crone scanned the surrounding dragon corpses again and said in a low voice, are also all dead, aren't they? So you're saying that we should just let it go? A second later, Fongbujua asked a more constructive question. We don't intend to avenge anyone. Similarly, we don't need to be responsible for anything they do. We're here. He looked at Blackbeard again. We want to make a deal with you, Captain. Before Blackbeard could reply, Fongbujua interrupted. What's there to talk about? Wouldn't we be able to do whatever we want if we kill all of you? Tell me your conditions first. However, Blackbeard did not fall for it. He decisively ignored Brother Jew's words and responded to Crone. Haha, it's very simple. Crone laughed sinisterly. Our target is only Fongbujua. Speaking of this, his pale, terrifying pupils moved and stared at Brother Jew. We know that Captain is here to retrieve the treasure. Here, I can promise, as long as you part ways with Fongbujua here, we will never disturb any of your pirate group's actions again. After Crone said these words, he seemed to feel that he was not persuasive enough. After 2 seconds, he added, Captain, I think you know very well, travelers from another world are basically untrustworthy. Only they know what their real purpose is. If you keep such a group of guys by your side, you may be stabbed in the back at any time. You don't have to say any more. Blackbeard did not listen anymore. He directly interrupted Crone and said, Your proposal is very good. Hey. Before he finished speaking, Snow had already begun to complain. You're turning hostile just like that. Previously, I agreed to cooperate with you in order to let you help me deal with any obstacles I may encounter in the treasure hunt. Blackbeard turned back and said, But now it seems that the target of that obstacle is actually not me, but you guys. He paused. That half-human, half-ghost guy makes a lot of sense. The standpoint of you travelers from another world can change at any time. Bringing you along will only increase the danger. You can't say that. Hong, who had not given up yet. He didn't want to give up Blackbeard so easily. The 3 of us are untrustworthy, but the 3 of them and the so-called master behind them can be trusted? Blackbeard laughed. Of course, they can't be trusted either, he said in a matter-of-fact tone, but there is a fundamental difference between them and you. Understood? When Feng Bujue heard this, he had already finished calculating Blackbeard's debt in his mind. Their strength is on the surface. Even if they don't keep their promise, you're confident that you can control the situation. But the strength of us travelers from another world, and even the logic of our actions, is something that you can't estimate. The word unknown often means infinite risk. Good, as expected of Feng Bujue, Blackbeard said. Blackbeard continued, since you understand. At this point, he revealed a smile that a pirate, a scoundrel, and a vicious villain should have. I don't think you'll blame me. After saying that, he turned his face to Crone and the others. The three of you, I'll leave these boys to you. As soon as he finished speaking, Blackbeard put away the sword in his hand. Without turning his head, he said loudly, Volger, Nizru, Brother Mark, bring Mad Eye and follow me. When the few officers saw this scene, they just exchanged a simple look and immediately did as they were told. Obviously, they didn't feel any surprise or shame about this deal. For pirates, this level of betraying their teammates was simply a common occurrence. Today, you're a rich captain, and tomorrow, you'll be sitting in a wooden bucket and being thrown on a deserted island by your subordinates to die. This was also very common in the pirate circle. Therefore, people in this line of work couldn't be too moral and couldn't be too serious. Only by adhering to the principle of drinking in the morning, could they adapt to this kind of pirate life with ups and downs. They're really leaving. Looking at the backs of those people as they left, Snow dragged his voice and sighed in a helpless tone. It's become a 3-on-3 situation. Hong Hu adjusted his glasses and said in a low voice, How about we split up and run? Snow proposed a strategy concisely. There is no need to be too long-winded when talking to smart people. It doesn't make any sense. Their target is only me. They won't split up just because we split up, Feng Bujue said. Hong Hu thought of something at this time. Doesn't that mean the two of us can just run away and leave you to them? Chapter 1329. Sure. Unexpectedly, Feng Bujue was unusually calm about Hong Hu's betrayal of his teammates. I also think that it's better for the two of you to leave. Hey, where are you up to now? Snow was getting more and more shrewd. He continued with a suspicious look on his face. You're not thinking of re-establishing some kind of dangerous agreement with these three guys after we leave, are you? Oh, who knows? Feng Bujue smiled and gave an answer that was as good as not saying anything. In the next second, Ambitionist laughed as well. He looked at Snow and said, That's it then. Let's go. Really? Snow was still not very sure whether the other party was joking or not. At this stage, this is undoubtedly the best choice, Hong Hu continued. You're right. Feng Bujue also said, The enemy's target is only me. There's no need for the two of you to stay here. He paused for half a second. Instead of getting involved in this kind of meaningless battle, why don't you hurry up and do something that will help you clear the game? This way, even if I die here, you still have a chance to complete the script. Brother Ju's reaction surprised Snow. The latter thought for a few seconds and then said, I didn't expect. Under such circumstances, you can still stand from a perspective of the team and make such an objective and calm judgment. I have to say I'm impressed. Impressed my asterisk SS. Hearing this, Hong Hu rolled his eyes and muttered softly. Obviously, this strategist had seen through Brother Ju's deeper intentions, but he did not intend to expose them. Okay, since you understand, let's get moving. Feng Bujue also understood. He then turned his gaze to Koronin and the others in the distance and said loudly, Look, the three on the other side are getting impatient. Ha. When Kuron heard this, he immediately sneered and looked back at his brother Ju with a perverted look. To make a long story short, under such circumstances, Hong Hu and Snow had no reason to force themselves to stay. After exchanging a few simple words, they left the open space in two different directions. So that's how it is. Seeing the two leave, Feng Bujue thought to himself, one of them will continue to pursue Blackbeard, while the other will go and stop the reinforcements that the Garlic Trio brought from the ship. Teaming up with these two fellows is rather worrisome. Indeed, with three smart people working together, they would be able to achieve twice the result with half the effort. Most of the plans and intentions, they only needed to observe each other for a moment to understand each other. There was no need for detailed explanations. I have to correct your point of view. After Hong Hu and Snow were completely out of sight, Crone spoke. I'm not in a hurry to kill you at all. His words were naturally directed at Brother Ju. Targeting the latter's sentence of the three on the other side are getting impatient. Why? Feng Bujue replied with a half-smile. Could it be because revenge is a delicious meal after cooling down? He was quoting from The Godfather. The lines in the book were not for the sake of being fashionable, but because he already knew what Karan was thinking. Looks like you know me. Karan's tone gradually turned cold. Although this is the first time we've met, when I saw you, many of the problems that were troubling me not long ago were easily solved. Brother Ju paused and said, Karan, your name? I've heard of it. I also know that you were once Soul Snatcher's confidant. Once? At this moment, a fierce glint appeared in Karan's eyes, and he interrupted sharply. Huh. Feng Bujue shrugged and laughed. All right, you were still. He deliberately emphasized the word still. Soul Snatcher's confidant. But then, he added in a very casual tone, although that guy is already dead, it's fine as long as you're happy. You bastard. Karan's cold aura could not withstand the test of Feng Bujue's torrential strength. He was quickly enraged and lost his cool. Cursing won't solve the problem. Brother Ju quickly continued. Of course, the matter of you leading a group of people who are still loyal to Soul Snatcher and betraying the Phantom Fiend Church is still commendable to me. At least it's more effective than cursing. He spread his hands and said in a very relaxed manner, Then, I might as well ask again. Your current master, the existence that you think is enough to help you complete your revenge. Who is it? Hearing this, Karan's expression changed again. A sinister smile appeared on his face again. Ha ha! Feng Bujue, I know you. You're still 10 years too early to get information from me. Enough. Are you done blabbering? Before Karan could finish his words, Edianti, who had been waiting impatiently with a war hammer on his shoulder, shouted and interrupted. Anyway, we're going to kill him anyway. I'll go first. This god of folly was just like his name. As a representative of the chaotic evil camp, what he liked to do the most was to shout, Eat my big X, while charging at the enemy. Everything else could wait. In front of 23, Ediani could still restrain himself a little. But now that he was out of the sight of his master, the war hammer in his hand was already thirsting for blood. In the blink of an eye, Ediani leaped. His huge body drew a parabola in the air like a bolt of lightning as he pounced straight at Brother Ju. Boom! After a short 2 seconds, the war hammer that looked like an electric pole hit the ground, smashing the corpses on the ground and leaving a spiderweb-like crater on the ground. If I'm not mistaken. After the attack landed, Feng Bujue's voice sounded immediately. His figure immediately appeared 10 meters away from Idiot's side. You should be the strongest among the three. You're quite observant. Ediani turned his only eyeball to look at Brother Ju and snorted coldly. Judging from his expression, he was obviously quite satisfied with this evaluation. However, Turius, who was watching the battle, was not happy when he heard this. Brat, you haven't even seen me make a move, and you're already making such a presumptuous assertion. The legendary Feng Bujue is nothing more than this. Don't be fooled. Unexpectedly, before Feng Bujue could say anything, Crone shouted first, He's trying to sow discord. Remember, don't be led by his words. As a member of the Phantom Fiend Church and Soul Snatcher's confidant, Crone knew a lot about Feng Bujue's actions. When he thought about how his former master was schemed to death by Brother Ju, and how he did not even get to see his enemy's face until his death, he gnashed his teeth in hatred. Hence, after the Twilight of the Gods incident, Crone had been collecting all kinds of information about Brother Ju. He also studied his words, actions, and habitual strategies. Now, He had already memorized most of the tricks that Brother Jew had used. In other words, not only could he prevent himself from being tricked, but he could also remind his companions. Ha! Do I need to sow discord to deal with trash like you? Feng Bujue saw Krone's reaction and showed an extremely mocking smile. Trash like you? The more Turius listened, the more he felt that his opponent's words were grating. When he repeated this sentence, he had already raised his greatsword. Looks like, if I don't let you experience my strength, you won't know how to write the word fear. What kind of strength do you have? When his teammates are not around, Feng Bujue's vulgarities came as he wished. Let me tell you, what I hate the most is a job like the Holy Knight. You piece of trash who uses the Holy Light job class to code. As he spoke, he turned his head to look at Ediani. And you, a huge piece of trash whose IQ is close to that of an invertebrate. Then, Krone was unlucky enough to be shot. And you, a traitor from the Phantom Fiend Church. Trash among trash. He scolded the two demigod-level players and the extremely powerful unique form NPC one by one. When he scolded them, his tone and gaze were still very much like that of a local ruffian. He was as arrogant as he could be, and as annoying as he could be. I'll sue all of you. When the next sentence came out of his mouth, Feng Bujue's tone mysteriously changed again. Trash like you. If you want to come at me together, hurry up and save me some time, so that I don't have to deal with all of you one by one. It's like I have diarrhea. Since he had already said so, the three of them did not have much to say. The three of them also understood that they might not win even if they were to scold one another. So, Krone and Turius chose to use action to shut Brother Jew up. At this point, the self-esteem of the 9 gods, the selfishness of preserving strength, and so on were meaningless. In short, there was only one word: fight. Anyway, they also thought that it was almost impossible for Ediani to kill Feng Bujue with his own strength. It was only a matter of time before the three of them attacked together. Feng Bujue's clamor was just a matter of time. When the battle started again, Krone waved the scepter in his hand and chanted a strange incantation. At the same time as the incantation, there were strange gurgling sounds. Feng Bujue also quickly noticed that the source of these strange sounds was the dragon corpses on the ground. Bang! A few seconds later, the first explosion was heard. The skin and flesh of a dragon corpse exploded in response to the sound. A bone dragon, with blue flames and a ghostly aura, rose from the dragon corpse and let out a roar. Bang! 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 Immediately after that, there was a series of explosions in the open space, as if firecrackers had been set off. In just a dozen seconds, the bone dragons, whose combat strength was not inferior to Wang Long's, rose from the corpses and crawled toward Feng Bujue. Ha! Ha! In this place full of corpses. Against a necromancer. After Krone completed the summoning spell, he was already sweating profusely. He looked at Brother Jew while panting and muttered to himself, Ha! With the help of 2 gods. I don't believe that you won't die. Chapter 1330. As soon as Koron finished his sentence, he heard a long hum. He immediately looked in the direction of the sound, only to see that at this moment, Ediani, Turius, and a bone dragon that was closer to Feng Bujue were attacking their target from 3 directions at the same time. A spiked hammer with an insane amount of power, a greatsword with a vast amount of holy aura, and a death dragon's breath full of cold air. 3 forces that could annihilate almost any creature attacked Feng Bujue's body at the same time. However, at this moment, along with the hum, 3 magic circles formed by black light appeared around Feng Bujue and welcomed the attacks from 3 directions. Boom! The next second, the sound of energy exploding was heard. Both Ediani and Turius widened their eyes, spat out blood, and flew back with a shocked expression. As for the bone dragon, it had already scattered into a pile of broken bones at the first moment. Oh no, we've been tricked. Although Koron did not know what Feng Bujue had done, he could roughly guess that the latter had used some kind of skill that could only be effective when he was attacked by multiple parties. Obviously, Feng Bujue's previous verbal insults and provocations were not, Or rather, it was not just to satisfy his own bad taste. More importantly, it was a means to put himself in a besieged situation. It's impossible to guard against this. Karan, who was already in a state of magic overdraft, could not help but kneel on one knee after receiving this heavy mental blow. He sighed in annoyance. Ediante, who had fallen on his back when he landed, let out an undisguised scream due to the pain. Ugh! Only Turius seemed to be in a good condition. After all, a paladin was a profession with strong defensive abilities. Just now, he had adjusted his body in the air and landed on his feet. Of course, in reality, his injury was only slightly lighter than Idian's, but he wanted to hold on for the sake of his dignity. Clap, clap, clap. A few seconds later, Fong Bujue began to clap unhurriedly and used his facial expressions to further pressure the enemy. Wonderful, very wonderful. After lazily clapping a few times, Fong Bujue smiled and said, "As expected of a god-level opponent, the power of the combined attack is much stronger than those travelers from another world. What exactly did you do?" Teleus wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and asked in a deep voice. "Do I need to explain it to you?" Fong Bujue's reply was quick, and his tone was matter-of-fact. From the beginning to the end, he was calm and confident. But in reality, for Brother Ju, this battle was not as easy as it seemed. Fong Bujue had just used the fourth special effect of the Psycho Poker, Frenzy, and its cooldown period was 1 day long. If you were to encounter such a joint attack again, you wouldn't be able to use it. So, he had to reveal as little information as possible and maintain this relaxed attitude to bluff. This way, the opponent would be afraid of the effect of the move just now and wouldn't dare to launch a joint attack again. Before he could finish speaking, Ediani had already rolled on the ground and got up from the ground. His one eye, which was already bloodshot, bulged as he roared at the sky. TSK, as he entered the frenzy state. Seeing this scene, Turius's expression became a little strange. What was even more surprising was that after muttering this sentence, he actually pulled out his greatsword and staggered back. Fong Bujue's ability to observe people's expressions was superb. He could tell at a glance what was going on. After thinking for a second, he opened his arms and shouted at Ediante. "Hey, Ediante, do you want to throw something? I'm right here." Edian's reaction was just as Brother Ju had expected. After being attracted by the latter, he was like a mad beast. With a roar, he rushed forward. At this moment, the god of foolishness charging posture was already using his hands and feet. He was rolling and crawling, and he even abandoned his war hammer. However, his strength and speed suddenly increased to the point where Fong Bujue couldn't shake him off without using body enhancement spell, modified. He's so strong. However, while Fong Bujue was escaping, he was secretly delighted. Then I'm relieved. There was naturally a reason why he was so happy. Brother Ju realized one thing when Turius retreated. Ediante, who had entered a berserk state, couldn't distinguish between friend and foe. Crone didn't react to this because he had never seen Ediante go berserk before. However, Turius and Ediante were both 9 gods and had fought against the 4 pillar gods together. He definitely knew this, so he retreated. Then, what could a berserk Ediante, who couldn't distinguish between friend and foe, be used for? The answer was obvious. It was perfect to use him to clean up the group of bone dragons around him. Therefore, after Fong Bujue stabilized Idian's aggro, he used body enhancement spell, modified, and used a speed that was only a little faster than Ediante, so that he wouldn't lose track of Ediante and wouldn't let him catch up to drag Ediante around the open space. Every time the agile Brother Ju passed by, brushed past, or drilled past a bone dragon, Ediante, who followed closely behind like a bulldozer, would smash, crush, or tear apart the bone dragon and continue his pursuit. Turius and Crone saw this, but they couldn't do anything about it. Just as Brother Ju had said earlier, Ediante was indeed the strongest one in the opponent's formation. At least in the matter of head-on, this type of person who sacrificed intelligence in exchange for strength often had an advantage. If it were any other time, Turius would probably be able to tie with Ediani in his normal state by relying on some special abilities. However, when he encountered a berserk state, he was helpless. As for Crone, his strength was probably a little weaker than some mediocre officers or jurors. Moreover, he was a necromancer who put his talent in summoning. At present, he had summoned dozens of bone dragons at once. Those dragon corpses that were incomplete by Blackbeard could not be used as summoning materials, so he could only gather dozens of them. He had basically burned through his mana. Forget about stopping the berserk Ediani. Even if he encountered a team of average players, he might not be able to win. Just like that, Fong Bujiwe used his speed advantage to lead Ediani around for a full 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, Edian's berserk state finally reached its time limit. When the berserk buff disappeared, the big idiot lost all his strength and fell to the ground. He rolled a few times and then lay flat on his back. As for Fong Bujiwe, it was not easy for him either. Even though he used the instant strike skill to make the 1% loss of life points per second of body enhancement spell, modified, become intermittent, he still spent about 80% of his life points. Fortunately, he still had the life point supplement. After he stopped, Brother Ju very decisively chugged down a large health potion. Since the goal of the game had changed, Fong Ju no longer had to consider the issue of finances, so he only carried large health potions with him. He filled up his health bar directly. One down. After Fong Bujua drank the life point supplement, he let out a sigh of relief. Then, he casually threw the bottle aside and looked at the remaining 2 enemies. There's also a piece of trash who forced himself to show off and overcast his spell, causing him to be impotent until now. There's also a piece of trash who wants to keep up appearances after getting injured, but in fact his legs are weak. As he said that, he stretched his neck. I don't mind asking, do you think you still have a chance to kill me? Screech. Just as Fong Bujue finished his sentence, the sound of wind cutting through the air suddenly appeared. The shadow of an assassination came whistling through the air. This was an extremely sudden attack. The attacker suddenly came out from the forest at the edge of the clearing and approached Fong Bujue with the speed of lightning. The route he took was straight toward Fong Bujue's back, completely within the latter's blind spot. Ivan's attack was a sure win. From the beginning, he had been waiting for this opportunity, so he did not descend from the sky with the other 3. Instead, he quietly lurked in the forest and slowly and quietly approached the clearing. Chapter 1331. Ivan's sneak attack was impeccable in terms of speed and suddenness. It wasn't until the sound of wind breaking that Fong Bujue realized something. At this time, it was too late for Brother Ju to react. No matter how godly Fong Bujue was, it was impossible for him to respond to such a premeditated, high-speed sneak attack without knowing that there was a 4th person. Therefore, he had no way to deal with this. If nothing went wrong, Brother Ju would be chopped in the back of his head by the opponent in the next second and turn into white light on the spot. However, the accident still happened. In the blink of an eye, another figure charged into the clearing with a speed faster than Ivan's, grabbing Ivan's wrist. Ugh, Ivan didn't know how to speak. When his foolproof attack was firmly caught by the opponent, he only let out a grunt. He then looked up and saw that the person who stopped him was a middle-aged man dressed like an ordinary sailor, with a hunched back and a face full of scabs. What the F***CK? A second later, Fong Bujue turned his head. His reaction was very fast. When the 2 words came out of his mouth, he used the momentum of turning around to deliver a side kick. Bang! This kick landed solidly on Ivan's chest, producing a sound similar to that of a battering ram hitting a door. The moment Ivan was hit, the pirate called Ken also very cleverly continued to clamp down on the former's wrist. This way, Ivan couldn't use the method of flying backwards to mitigate the impact. He could only stand in place and take the full force of the attack. PFFF. Even if Fong Bujue's physical skills under normal conditions were not as good as the world elite bosses, he was still a level 51 player with S fighting mastery. This kick was enough to make Ivan vomit blood. Haha, you're still the same. After seeing Brother Ju's kick, Ken smiled. You don't know how to fight at all. When he said this, he had already let go of Ivan's hand. Ivan was still in a stiff state due to the kick, so he couldn't escape. He could only stagger back a few steps. "Let me show you," Ken said as he rushed towards Ivan. His hunchback didn't affect his agile and powerful movements. Was a kick. Before he finished his sentence, a red light burst out. It was also a side kick, but this time, Ken's kick had a large circle. The angle between his legs was more than 120 degrees. Under this premise, the center of his body was still straight and as steady as Mount Tai. Compared to Fong Bujue's side kick, which was barely raised to a horizontal position, Ken's kick was as sharp as a blade's kick's. Even though his kick was much better than a brother's kick. Screech. In the blink of an eye, the flashing red circle kick landed accurately on Ivan's head. And then, Ivan lost his head. As for his headless body, it immediately knelt down in dejection, laid down on the ground, and convulsed until finally it stopped moving. "So it's you." When Ken kicked, Fong Bujue had already moved his attention away from Ivan. He looked at Ken for a few seconds and said, "Now, how should I address you? Kate, one red iron or you?" Is not quite accurate. Unexpectedly, before Brother Ju could finish, another person's voice came out of Ken's mouth and interrupted him. "You should say you." "Oh." Fong Bujue soon noticed the change in the other person. He used the data perspective to re-examine the other person and said, two anomalies sharing the same body, and it's a body that originally belonged to an NPC. That's a long story." Red Iron seemed to have regained the right to speak. He spoke faster and more directly. "Let's take care of those guys first." After that, he turned his head and looked at Crone and the others in the distance. At this time, Crone finally caught his breath. Turius also used the holy light to restore himself to his best condition. Only Ediane still had not recovered from the side effect of the berserk state and was still lying on the ground. From a certain perspective, his move was quite similar to the descent of the war demon. "TSK, it seems like another troublesome guy has arrived." Turius snorted, glanced at Crone, and said, "I say, can you still do it?" "I." Crone's cold eyes flashed with fire. "Even if I die, I will drag Fong Bujue down." "You're thinking too much," Fong Bujue shouted. Before the other person could finish, he used Jeppo, and rushed over. The Bell's daily knife in his hand went straight for Crone's head. Ka! At the same time, accompanied by the sound of bones exploding, a bone prison that was the size of a phone booth and could cover a person appeared around Crone. "I knew you would suddenly make a move." At the end of the day, Crone was someone who had studied Fong Bujue. Even though he could not say that he could predict the enemy's every move in battle, he was still prepared. He and Ivan were the kind of people who would put themselves in the position of the weak and try to challenge Fong Bujue. This kind of person was very common among players, but among the unique NPCs and anomalies, there were very few who would fight with players with this kind of mentality. Most of the high-level existences that Fong Bujue had encountered before had the mentality of, "I am stronger than this traveler from another world," when they fought with Brother Ju. However, after the Twilight of the Gods, the situation was different. Now, any high-level existence in the main universe who could recognize Brother Ju would not make such a low-level mistake as underestimating the enemy. Therefore, a strategy like the Brat's lower leg plus the blade to break the defense would be very difficult to implement in the future. Of course, the blade to break the defense was already broken. I also expected this. With your physical skills, you won't be able to dodge or block. You can only use magic to defend. When Fong Bujue said this, his other hand had already taken out the Tian Gang Disha box and started to use this item to absorb the mana from the bone prison. Seeing this, Karen realized that Fong Bujue's surprise attack was just a feint. The hand holding the knife did not exert any strength at all, so he was not stabbed by the bone prison that suddenly appeared. On the other hand, Turius was also very good at judging the situation. When he saw that Brother Ju and Karen had fallen into a temporary stalemate, he immediately took advantage of the situation and swung his giant sword at Fong Bujue's back. Too slow. How could Red Iron let Tullius do as he wished? Once again, he charged forward like a bolt of lightning, aiming for the sword blade that was sweeping upwards with a spring kick. Then there was a bang sound. The trajectory of the giant's sword suddenly changed under this kick. It became an upward momentum, brushing past the back of Fong Bujue's head and slashed nothing. Hindrance. After Turius swung his sword, he did not panic. He turned around, raised his hand, and directly used his palm to cast the skill Hand of Judgment at Red Iron. A golden energy containing the power of holy light gushed out and blasted toward Red Iron. Already said, however, Red Iron's voice immediately appeared behind Turius. When this word came out, Red Iron had already grabbed Turius' shoulders. 2. When this word came out, Red Iron threw Turius into the air. Slow. As soon as this word left his mouth, Turius had already quickly descended and was grabbed by Chitai horizontally in front of him. Yes. When the last word came out, Red Iron had already used his knee to perform a standard folding waist lock on Turius' spine. Uffed. When Turius was hit and spat out blood, his face was full of disbelief. As an NPC with the ability to fly, he thought that he could escape from the opponent's control in the interval between being thrown, but the judgment of chain toss prevented him from trying. After this strike, it could basically be announced that Turius was KO'd. On the other side, the attack and defense between Fong Bujue and Karen had also reached a critical point. Chapter 1332. I'll give you one more chance. Fong Bujue saw that the mana in the bone prison was almost completely drained. Tell me, who is your master? Then I'll consider letting you live. Oomph. Do you think I'll believe you? Karen, who was still struggling, replied. Once I tell you the information you want, you'll immediately turn hostile and take my life. He's right. At this time, Red Iron suddenly took over the conversation and said to Fong Bujue, even if you don't kill him, his master won't let him go. Oh, Brother Ju heard something from Red Iron's words. You mean, you know who Karen's master is? Of course I know, Red Iron replied. Ah, then it's easy. Fong Bujue heard this and chuckled. At the same time, the bone prison around Karen's body was also drained of mana and turned into a pile of broken bones. Huh. Karen seized the last chance and once again overdrew his mana and shot a bone spear at Fong Bujue, who was close at hand. Unfortunately, this kind of direct and expected attack was almost a negligible threat to Brother Ju. With the help of zero-time difference calculation, Fong Bujue easily evaded his opponent's bone spear without using much stamina. With a flicker, he reached Krone's side. All right, you've done your best, Fong Bujue said as he used the LV-10 Wild Ball Punch. From a personal point of view, he did not have any opinions about Karan's actions. This necromancer was only fighting for his beliefs and his loyalty to his old master. Although Karan himself knew that this kind of revenge against an enemy who was one dimension higher than himself was destined to end in failure, he had no regrets. What should we do with the other two? After Karen was killed and fell to the ground, Red Iron asked Fong Bujue. Let them do what they want. Fong Bujue glanced at Turius, who had lost consciousness, and Ediandi, who was still lying on the ground. He shrugged and replied. After a few seconds, Brother Ju spoke again and said then, Now I think you... Oh no, you should have something to tell me. I'll get straight to the point. In that second, X1, Wing immediately took over the control of Ken's body and replied, Krone's master, who is the target of our mission this time, is 23. What? When he heard those 3 words, Fong Bujue showed a rare look of surprise. However, he quickly recovered his inherent calmness and asked, Aren't you all members of the organization? Why are you in such a situation? That's a long story. By then, Red Iron had come online again. Now that he was a level 1 anomaly, his personality program was quite complete. Therefore, when he said that, he could not help but sound disappointed. We only recently discovered the anomaly with number 23. If not for the fact that she killed Sharpwind, perhaps we would still be kept in the dark by her until now. Sharpwind is dead? Naturally, Feng Bujue remembered that name. Even though he did not have much interaction with our two, Sharp Wind, his Jeppo, and Renkyaku were taught by this anomaly. These two skills were the combat skills that Brother Ju used the most, and he was most familiar with. As the saying goes, do not forget the person who dug the well when you drink water, and Feng Bujue had quite a bit of affection for this anomaly. Red Iron continued in a low voice. Sharp Wind was the first person in the organization to discover 23's anomaly. The information that we currently know about 23's actions were basically obtained from him in secret. What did 23 do? And what did she mean by anomaly? Feng Bujue asked. Red Iron sighed. I'll have to start from before tournament for the best S1. He paused for 2 seconds before continuing. During that period, 23 temporarily left the inner world under the order of Zero. Zero gave part of his core code to 23 so that she could travel between the various scenario worlds. Her mission, you should know that already. It was to collect the SCP items that were scattered around Thriller Paradise and use them as a weapon to fight against Origin. It was not until the final battle of S1 that 23 returned to the organization. At the time, some kind of change had already happened to her, and Zero had already noticed something, but due to the threat that Luke created, this was temporarily put on hold. After S1, Zero himself disappeared mysteriously due to some unknown reason, and there was no news of him for a long time. When he contacted us again, 23 was involved in the fight over SCP-079 with Link and Ed. Now that I think about it, the contact with SCP-079 should be the turning point for 23 to go to the extreme, so Feng Bujue interrupted. What do you mean by her change? Evolving power. At that moment, Wing took over the body again and replied. Isn't that the basic power that all anomalies have? Feng Bujue asked. 23's evolution ability is extraordinary, Wing replied. 1 second later, the persona that spoke switched back to Red Iron. We also recently heard something from Zero. 23 is not a normal anomaly. Like Zero, she is an anomaly. Even Zero was unable to decipher her original code, and she has a unique characteristic about her. At this point, Wing continued, she does not have a name. This sentence caused Feng Bujue's expression to shift, and his mind was buzzing. For so long, Brother Ju and everyone else seemed to have gotten used to calling her 23. Even Brother Ju himself had forgotten that the name X, 23, was given to her when he first met her in the scenario. He had noticed that she looked like a female version of Wolverine, and he had given her the name X, 23. Wait a minute. Feng Bujue arranged his thoughts and asked, You anomalies are all born with names? Yes, Wing confirmed. Be it normal anomalies like me and Red Iron, high-level existences like Zero and Ed, or even the anomalies created by the anomalies. Dragon, Quaiduo, Infinite, all the anomalies have names from the moment they are born. To put it in a way that is easier for you to understand, a set of data, a file, at least has a file name. A file without a name cannot exist in the world of data. Perhaps you humans can make a file's name invisible in the interface, but from the perspective of a system, any file has a code the moment it is created. For an anomaly, a name is something that can be equated to our existence, Chen Gu explained. 2 seconds later, Red Iron continued. But the 23 that you, Feng Bujue, personally named does not have a name. She is a nameless anomaly. What does that mean? Feng Bujue asked. I don't know. Even Zero knows nothing about the secret of the nameless anomaly, Wing said. Wing added, what we know is that number 23's ability to evolve is qualitatively different from ours. Using our level 1 to 4 anomalies to measure her ability is not accurate, Red Iron nodded. Based on the information gathered by Sharp Wind, we can basically deduce this timeline. Before S1, 23, who obtained part of Zero's code, had already analyzed and learned the code to convert some of Zero's power into her own. After that, when she was searching for SCP items, she might have been influenced by some of the items, or like how she learned Zero's power, She might have obtained some causality power that only SCP items have. In any case, during the S1 finals, she already had the ability to infect other data. At this point, Fong Bujue was reminded of the scene where 23 killed Y2 Shine in the S1 finals. He clearly remembered that when 23 attacked Y2 Glint, a golden stream of data seeped into Y2 Glint's body like liquid from the wound until it was completely corroded. You can imagine what 23 was able to learn after coming into contact with SCP-079, an existence that could compete with the system. Red Iron continued. Since then, her ability to infect data was upgraded to Devour. Doesn't Infinite have a similar power? Fong Bujue asked. Compared to XEI, Infinite is as backward as those communication devices that have already been eliminated by the times. Wing replied. Infinite was able to absorb Link because he already had a part of the ladder's code with him. But 23 is different. She can absorb everything, be it the same kind of data from the inner world or the data creatures from the main universe. She can even absorb the existence of other universes, organic or non-organic. That works? Fong Bujue gasped in shock. Isn't it scary? Red Iron replied. As long as she uses the data infection method to format the target, then she can consume it. And this kind of consumption and absorption is not just to obtain energy. As long as the realm of the being consumed is high enough. For example, if she consumes a high-level super AI or the god of wisdom of a certain universe, etc., then the upper limit of 23's ability will be further increased. In Zero's words, every time she devours a high-dimensional existence, her calculation rate will improve greatly. That's right. Understood. Fong Bujue's expression became serious. Let's stop talking about the ability here. Indeed, what they knew so far was enough. You two better tell me. Brother Ju paused, then asked, what is 23's purpose in coming to this Devil's Chomp Island? Chapter 1333. The night was getting darker and darker. The cold sea breeze brought with it a cloud of mist, covering the blood moon in the sky with a thin veil. The gradually dimming light seemed to be indicating something. The atmosphere of an impending storm had quietly enveloped the fragmented Devil's Maw Island. At this moment, at the southern border of the North Island. Since you're already here, why are you still hiding? Blackbeard stood on a smooth rock, facing the sea, and said without turning his head. His voice was not very loud, but it was enough for Hong Hu to hear. A few seconds later, Hong Hu walked out of the forest behind them. He adjusted his glasses and said calmly, "It seems that I have to thank you." Why? Blackbeard asked himself. Because I didn't directly drag you out of the forest and crush you to death like how I dealt with the trash from the Phantom Fiend Church? Yes. Hong Hu shrugged. That's why. Don't misunderstand, Blackbeard continued. It's not that I don't want to do that, but I can't. That means... Hong Hu keenly sensed the hidden message in Blackbeard's words. That trick won't work on everyone. Isn't this obvious? Blackbeard continued. If I could use it on anyone, I would have dragged Mad Eye over during the naval battle during the day and quickly ended the battle. Hong Hu thought for a second. The activation condition has to do with the target's individual strength, right? That's right. As Blackbeard spoke, he raised his hand and sucked a stone from the ground into his hand. For inanimate objects like this, as long as they aren't too big, I can freely control them with my mental power. As for living things, it depends on the strength of the energy they contain. Hong Hu let out a rather subtle laugh when he heard this. What are you laughing at? Blackbeard asked. I just suddenly remembered. Hong Hu replied with a smile. When I was on the Queen's Revenge, I vaguely heard the conversation of several sailors. One of them once said, "This ship is alive and will obey the captain's orders." I once saw the rope on the ship move by itself and strangle a guy who was about to attack the captain. About that, Blackbeard said, "Indeed, I intentionally let some of the sailors with lower combat strength have such a misunderstanding. This helped them maintain their reverence for me. Then what about the members with higher combat power? At this point, Ambitionist's eyes scan the officers around Blackbeard. They should be able to tell that it is your power that allows the things on the ship to move on their own. How did you manage to keep them in awe of you? It's simple. As Blackbeard spoke, he turned around to look at Ambitionist. These officers of mine, naturally, they know how strong I am compared to those crew members with lower combat power. And the clearer they realize my strength, the less likely it is for them to have the courage to resist me. I see. Hong-Hu nodded and adjusted his glasses again. On the surface, Hong-Hu was still calm and composed, but he was actually quite nervous. He was ready to face a sudden attack at any time. Okay, let's stop chatting here. 2 seconds later, Hong-Hu continued. Captain, since you found me and called me out, it should mean that there is still room for negotiation between us, right? Although they had not been in contact for long, Hong-Hu had long determined that Blackbeard was a cunning old fox, so there was no need to beat around the bush with him. It was easy to understand. If Blackbeard wanted to get rid of Ambitionist, the stalker, he would not have talked to Ambitionist at all. Instead, he would have turned around and caught him off guard. That would have had the highest chance of success. Now, Blackbeard took the initiative to negotiate with Hong-Hu, which naturally showed that there was still room for negotiation. Ha! I remember. You're called Hong-Hu? Blackbeard sneered and asked. That's right. Hong-Hu answered in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Okay, brother Hong-Hu. Blackbeard suddenly changed the way he addressed Hong-Hu. In the latter's opinion, this was not a good thing. I'll be frank with you. I still believe you and that little brother Snow, but Feng Bujue, I don't trust him. He paused, stretched out his hand, and made an inviting gesture. As long as you tell me your real mission and promise to draw a clear line with Feng Bujue, we can still work together. Hearing this, Hong-Hu's expression changed slightly. He thought to himself, what a scary guy. Compared to his unfathomable martial strength, this overlord of the chaotic sea's attainments in strategy and shrewdness are the real troublesome parts. What? After a few seconds, Blackbeard asked, do you still need to consider this? He was indeed a scary man. He knew that he needed to continue pressuring the other party at this time, so that they did not have enough time and space to think. Ha! Ha ha! Fortunately, the person standing here was Hong-Hu. Okay, that's exactly what I wanted. The title of wise general was definitely not undeserved. These few seconds were enough for him to settle the score clearly. Oh, Blackbeard saw Hong-Hu's reaction and was indeed a little surprised. Captain, to tell you the truth, Hong-Hu put on a sly face. I never thought of Feng Bujue as a companion from the beginning. He looked around. There are no outsiders here. I'll just tell you, I've wanted to kill him for a long time. Is that so? Blackbeard was not stupid. These few words and some acting skills were far from enough to convince him. Of course it is. Hong-Hu said, you see, I'm here. Doesn't that mean that Snow and I have already left Feng Bujue alone in that open space? Didn't you agree to split up? Blackbeard's reaction was surprisingly quick. He immediately thought of another possibility and asked. But Hong-Hu was also very impressive. He was seen through and revealed the truth, but he still tried hard to control his expression. His expression did not change, and he answered smoothly, Humph. Under that kind of situation? Don't joke, Captain. He shook his head and said, if it were you, facing 3 strong enemies, and 2 of them were existences at the level of the 9 gods, would you agree to let the only 2 helpers by your side leave? Blackbeard muttered. Indeed, relatively speaking, you and Snow took advantage of the fact that the enemy's target is only Feng Bujue and took the opportunity to leave Feng Bujue behind and escape. This assumption is the most reasonable. Isn't that so? Hong-Hu heard this and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He quickly responded. Unexpectedly, in the next second, Blackbeard changed the topic again. Unfortunately, I still don't believe you. When he finished speaking, Blackbeard suddenly waved his arm and threw the stone that he had sucked into his hand at Hong-Hu. Chapter 1334. This was a real villain, suspicious, fickle, untrustworthy, and vicious. When his left hand was still making an inviting gesture, his right hand had already launched an attack. In the next second, the stone that was faster than a cannonball penetrated Hong Hu's body. However, Blackbeard, who saw this scene, showed a hint of surprise. Oomph, better than I thought. Immediately afterward, Mad Eye, whose ability was restricted by the shackles, also commented with a sneer. Obviously, only Blackbeard and Mad Eye, the two captains, saw what Hong Hu did. The officers on Blackbeard's ship, at least 3 or 4 seconds after the stone flew out, were all fooled by Hong Hu. Whoosh! Soon, the stone that penetrated Hong Hu's body hit a tree in the forest and directly broke the tree in half. When the tree fell, Blackbeard's officers realized that the Hong Hu that was penetrated by the stone was just an afterimage. Chi. At the same time, the sound of light arrows piercing through the air was heard. These arrows of light came in a very strange manner. It was as if there were a dozen or so people attacking at the same time from all directions. However, as far as the eye could see, other than the small exploding dots of light in the night sky, there was no sign of Ambitionist or anyone else. Oh, I really can't underestimate this group of travelers from another world. Facing this storm of attacks, Blackbeard stood in the same place as if nothing happened. He even muttered something in his mouth. When the light arrows were about a meter away from Blackbeard, they crashed into his air shield and were disintegrated and dissipated. Although the captain seemed to be very relaxed, his crew didn't have that kind of god-level passive defense. The officers still had to rely on their own skills to deal with Hong Hu's attack. For a while, the 4 of them were also in a mess. The most miserable one was Nezru, because in addition to protecting himself, he was also responsible for protecting Mad Eye, so unfortunately he was hit by an arrow in this wave of rapid attacks. It's been 10 seconds. It's about time, right? When the continuous shooting of light arrows reached the 10th second, Blackbeard opened his mouth again and said this. Before he could finish his sentence, Ambitionist really did reappear. Hong Hu reappeared on the water like a floating leaf, holding his light bow in his hand. At this moment, he didn't look good. Not the kind of bad that the stone pierced through his body, but the kind of bad that his body and his physical strength and spiritual power were rapidly declining. Phew! After adjusting his breathing, Ambitionist looked at Blackbeard and said with a bitter smile, "Putting aside your defensive ability that makes people despair, your dynamic vision can keep up with me, and you can even see through my moves. This really makes me feel a little defeated." Oomph. Blackbeard sneered, "You don't have to belittle yourself. The flying scythe kick just now was the fastest I've ever seen. Not to mention, you can use that kind of explosive movement technique and continuously make accurate long-range attacks at the same time." He paused. "Unfortunately, there's a qualitative difference between you and me in terms of power level. In the face of this difference, skills lose their meaning." Ha! Hong Hu heard this, and his bitter smile turned into a bitter smile. Then, "I can only try to bridge this gap with my willpower." Oh! Blackbeard seemed to have noticed something from his expression and words. However, this time, Hong Hu didn't give him time to think and leeway. It was too late to say, but in the blink of an eye, a white light flashed, and Hong Hu, who was standing on the water a moment ago, appeared next to Blackbeard in an instant. "With just you," and Blackbeard, at this moment, completely understood the opponent's intention. The second he said the first 3 words, Hong Hu straightened his arms in front of him and aimed his palms at him. "You also want to die with me." And when Blackbeard said the second half of his sentence, Hong Hu's palms suddenly exploded with a shocking white light. Boom! In the blink of an eye, a ball of blazing white spiritual energy exploded close to Blackbeard's body. At this distance, his protective air shield couldn't be activated. Even if it was Blackbeard, he still suffered some damage. Name, Holy Deed, Burning Lotus, Skill Card Attribute. Active skill, disappears after 5 uses, 3/5. Skill type, Combat Spiritual Art. Effect, overlapping palms, releasing a powerful explosion of spiritual energy. Consumption, 1 spiritual energy value. Learning requirement, Combat Mastery D, Spiritual Art Mastery, a remark, one of Zhui Ling temples. 36 holy deeds. One needs to master the temple's other ultimate skill, Vajra Soul, to fully display its power. Otherwise, the user will suffer a certain degree of backlash the moment the skill is activated. Just from the description, it was clear that the skill Hong who was using was not the complete version. Of course, if he had really gotten his hands on the complete version, he wouldn't even be able to use it. This was because the complete version of the holy deed, Burning Lotus, added the requirement of mastering the Vajra Soul mantra to the learning conditions column. So, where to go to find this Vajra Soul? There were two ways. One was to find it inside the thriller box. The other was to follow the hint in the skill description and find a place called Zhui Ling Temple in one of the scenario worlds in Thriller Paradise and try to get the monks there to teach him. In any case, this was a matter of luck. At least, Hong who hadn't learned it yet. As a result, after using this move on Blackbeard, Ambitionist had unavoidably suffered a heavy injury. Several seconds later, when the powerful white light dissipated, Blackbeard focused and realized that Hong who had once again disappeared. And this time, Blackbeard couldn't even capture the man's presence. TSK. Dying together is a lie. So the real plan is to escape? Blackbeard looked at the wound on his left arm and grumbled with annoyance. Earlier, knowing that he couldn't activate the Chi shield, Blackbeard instinctively raised his arm to block this wave of attack. And the result? His left arm was blown up into a bloody mess, and the wound was so deep that one could almost see his bone. On the other hand, when Blackbeard was speaking, the 4 officers under him had just recovered from the temporary blinding effect caused by the white light. Only Mad Eye saw everything clearly because when his exposed eye was blinded by the white light, he quickly removed his eye patch to reveal his other eye. Many pirates would put on an eye patch for their normal eye. That way, when the light around them changed drastically, they only needed to remove the eye patch and use the spare eye to regain their sight. Other than that, wearing an eye patch could, to a certain extent, make the enemy underestimate the enemy. You should be thankful that the kid doesn't seem to be good at close combat, and his long-range attacks will trigger your Chi shield. Or else, your injury would have been even worse. You call that an injury? After hearing what Mad Eye said, Blackbeard didn't back down. He put on a nonchalant expression and asked in return. Mad Eye was choked by his words and turned his head away, no longer taunting him. You think you're smart? Don't think I don't know what you've done. After a moment, Blackbeard's wound was almost healed. At this time, he suddenly muttered a few words to himself and walked to Nezru's side. Nezru wanted to ask what the captain wanted to do, but Blackbeard raised his hand and flipped his palm, facing Nezru's calf that was shot by the light arrow. Immediately after, a small piece of light gravel the size of a broken diamond flew out from Nezru's wound and was quickly absorbed into Blackbeard's palm. Captain, this is? Nezra looked at the light gravel suspiciously. It's some kind of tracking beacon that he left behind. Blackbeard continued. He snorted with a fake smile and then said, that kid is very smart. The moment I threw the stone at him, he analyzed the situation very clearly. From his point of view, if he fought, he definitely had no chance of winning. If he wanted to escape, he had to escape far enough that I couldn't detect it. Then it would be considered safe. But if he retreated to that distance, it would be equivalent to him losing track of us, which he couldn't accept. So he put on that good show for us just now. I see. Mr. Volger heard this and more or less understood. He immediately responded from the extreme speed when he used the flying scythe kick. If he really wanted to run, the moment you threw the stone and showed your intention to attack, he could have run away. He chose to stay. Either he had the confidence to win, or he had another purpose. That's right. Blackbeard continued the conversation and looked at Nezru, who was beside him. And when you were hit by the light arrow, his purpose had been achieved. Logically, he should have retreated at that time, but he still didn't leave in a hurry, because he was smart enough. He knew that he had to make at least one more effective and powerful attack attempt to divert our attention and hide the secret he left behind. Nezru's brain was not fast, but it was much better than the Mark brothers. He could still keep up with the captain's train of thought. Ha! Ha! After he figured it out, he laughed. So now, didn't he work for nothing? It's not just a waste of effort, Blackbeard said as he crushed the light gravel in his hand and scattered it into the wind. The last move that this kid used on me was obviously beyond the scope of his ability. At the moment when the white light was about to cover my vision, I clearly saw his hand was blown up just like mine. He shrugged and smiled viciously. Oomph. This is called trying to steal a chicken only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. Chapter 1335. Let's talk about Snow's side. 10 minutes ago, as soon as he left the clearing, he quickly returned along the route he came from. Not long after, he arrived at the large crater created by the explosion spell array. It was there that he successfully intercepted Garlic Head, who was leading dozens of reinforcements. According to the plan, Snow's task was to trick this group of people back to the ship and tell them, "The captain has ordered that you don't need to come with us anymore." In order to achieve this goal, or rather, to make this lie sound more realistic, Snow had already thought of an excuse. However, Big Brother Garlic was not a fool. He was known for his cautious and vigilant way of doing things. Faced with the one-sided words of an outsider like Snow, of course, Garlic Head would not easily believe it. Therefore, he asked Snow to lead the way and bring them to verify that the captain has already defeated the enemy's main forces and has ordered them to retreat before making a decision. Therefore, Snow walked toward the clearing with Garlic Head and his group of 3, as well as the dozens of reinforcements that they had brought along. About 10 minutes later, see, I didn't lie to you, did I? When Snow said this, he put on a helpless expression. In fact, when he saw that the clearing in front of him was empty, he also heaved a sigh of relief. However, his acting skills were still quite reliable, and he would not let the other party see through the changes in his heart. Garlic Head looked at the dragon carcasses, dragon bones, and the traces left behind by the battle. He pondered for a moment before replying, "All right, it seems that what you said is true." Even Garlic Head was fooled. His 2 loyal partners, Godfrey and Marty, naturally couldn't see any flaws in the whole thing. As for the other sailors, they were basically combatants who focused on fighting and rarely thought about problems. As for what the captain and the officers were up to, they wouldn't ask. Then, after thinking for a few seconds, Garlic Head looked at Snow and asked, "What about you? Are you going back to the ship with us?" "No, I'm just here to pass on the message. I still have to follow up," Snow replied. Oh, Garlic Head was, after all, a paranoid person. He continued, "Captain didn't allow us to go, but allowed you guys to were an ally. He didn't know that Blackbeard had fallen out with Brother Jew and the others, so he didn't dare to be too rash." "Are we going together? Is there anything wrong?" Snow continued, "Since you're so worried, why don't you chase after them with me? And ask your captain yourself?" Although he was lying, his attitude sounded as if he had nothing to fear. It was more genuine than the truth. Sure enough, when Garlic Head heard that, he immediately cowered. No, then forget it. Even the officers on the ship didn't dare to question the captain's orders. Disobeying orders was a taboo that couldn't be touched. At this moment, Garlic Head basically believed that the order "Captain doesn't allow you to follow them" was true. If he still insisted on following them, then, with Blackbeard's capricious and ruthless temperament, it was very likely that he would kill Garlic Head if he was unhappy. "Is that so?" Snow continued to maintain his calm appearance and shrugged. "Then, let's part ways here." What he was implying was that you can take those people and go back now. Garlic Head was indeed ready to leave, but he seemed to have sensed something strange. So, he still dawdled on the spot and asked tentatively, "Mr. Snow, I wonder, how are you going to follow the captain and the others?" As he spoke, he turned his head and glanced at the side of the empty space. "Are we still going to follow that group of marks?" This sentence, this gaze, it was a trap, an extremely dangerous trap that could expose Snow's lies in an instant. Garlic Head was an experienced person after all, so he was very cunning. In fact, there was no mark at all in the direction that he indicated with his eyes. The real mark, Garlic Head had already seen it, and it wasn't in that direction. These marks could only be recognized by the sailors of the Blackbeard pirates who were above the level of a small leader. Because Blackbeard had previously said that he would leave marks to guide the reinforcements, Mr. Werg had been drawing them along the way. Even when he was separated from the players, he didn't stop. Anyway, the players couldn't recognize those marks and couldn't see where they were pointing. At this moment, Garlic Head's question was a test. If Snow looked in the direction where there was no mark and answered, "Yes, I'm going to follow that mark and chase after them," that meant that no one had taught him how to recognize the mark at all. Everything he said before was a lie. He just wanted to trick Garlic Head into leading the reinforcements back to the ship. And if Snow didn't fall for this trick, then he had to explain how he was going to follow Blackbeard and the others who had been gone for a long time. If he couldn't explain it clearly, it would be equally suspicious. "Hey, why are you still here?" Just when Garlic Head asked the question of the trap and Snow was about to respond, suddenly another voice sounded. "Do you need to take so long to pass on a message?" Fong Bujua said as he walked out from behind the tree where the real mark was. "Tis." Snow's reaction was also very fast. He immediately replied in an impatient tone, "Didn't you see it yourself?" He was worried and thought I was lying, so he came with me to take a look. "What the hell?" Fong Bujua wasn't as gentlemanly as Snow. He glared at Garlic Head and said in a hooligan tone, "How dare you? Who do you think you are?" "Your captain is waiting for us to arrive so that we can start the next step of the operation. 5 minutes ago, he was already impatient and asked me to come back as fast as I could to see what was going on. In the end, it's you who is dragging your feet here. Do you want to die?" When he said this, he really pulled out his sword. "Otherwise, I'll just cut off your head and explain it to your captain." Garlic Head listened to this line and looked at this scene. He broke out in a cold sweat. "Damn it, what am I thinking? The other party is Fong Bujua, the man who destroyed the Crazy Eye pirates with one sword. The captain has already confirmed that he has formed an alliance with him. Why would I want to die and suspect his companions after cursing himself in his heart?" Garlic Head quickly changed his expression and admitted defeat. I'm sorry. We'll withdraw now. We won't bother you anymore." After that, he turned his head and walked away as if he was running for his life. As he trotted, he gestured to the sailors, telling them not to talk too much and to withdraw quickly. In this way, dozens of people rushed back into the forest and turned back the way they came. That was close. When a group of people walked away and disappeared, Fong Bujua looked at Snow and said with a smile, "Oh, if I hadn't been careful and waited for you here, you would have probably died here." "Humph." Snow also smiled. "I'm not as naive as you think." When Garlic Head said Mark, I already guessed what he wanted to do. I won't fall for that kind of trap. If you don't appear, I'll say that I don't know what the mark is, but I'll catch up with you through some kind of communication between us travelers from another world. As for the specific method, I have no comment. That way, he can't say anything more. Okay. I'll take this as an unnecessary move." Fong Bujua put the knife in his hand back into the scabbard and said again, "Oh, yes, let me introduce. This is Ken." When Brother Ju said this, his eyes were looking behind Snow. Snow was stunned and instinctively replied, "Who is it?" He turned his head and followed the other person's gaze. In the end, when his face turned 90 degrees, he was shocked. Wow, Snow really did take a small step forward. He looked at Ken and asked, "When did you stand behind me?" Red Iron ignored him and just tilted his head to look at Brother Ju with a smile. This kid's level was trained by someone, right? It's obvious. Fong Bujue replied non-committally. "Hold on level." Snow looked at the NPC in front of him, who looked quite scary in surprise. He thought quickly for a few seconds and said, "You are an anomaly." "I see." Red Iron's expression changed slightly. "You're quite smart. As for his identity, I'll explain it to you on the way." Fong Bujue then said to Snow, "Now, since the reinforcements have been tricked by us, the next step is to find Hong who screech." At that moment, Brother Ju's words were interrupted by a gust of wind. Following that sound, a white shadow darted out from the forest behind him and slowed down as it approached him until it fell in front of him. Ha! Hong Hu lay on the ground and looked at the three people who were standing around him. He took a few deep breaths and then stuttered. Me? Ha! My arm. My arm. We see it, we're not blind. Feng Bujue dragged out his voice and slowly squatted down beside Ambitionist. He quickly took out the forest jewel, Su like a forest, from his inventory and activated the item's special effect on Ambitionist. But you're quite powerful as well. I haven't seen you for a while, and both of your forearms have been blown off. The orb's special effect was instant healing of wounds on the target's body, cooldown of 24 hours. Only able to heal external wounds and repair limbs. Unable to remove diseases, curses, poisons, and other debuffs. Therefore, Hong Hu's severed arms instantly grew back at an incredible speed. I'm not in a mood to joke with you. Hong Hu did not hold back with Brother Ju. After his wounds healed and he regained the ability to retrieve items, he immediately took out a bottle of life points recovery potion from his inventory and gulped it down. After that, he said, "To make Blackbeard fall for the trap, I had no choice but to give up my hands." Chapter 1336. Blackbeard's way of hiding treasures was naturally different from others. He would never hide his treasures in a fixed location in a certain plane, because he was very clear that time was an omnipotent pushing hand. It could turn love into hatred, comedy into tragedy, dreamers into snobbish ghosts. Of course, it could also turn land into oceans, mountains into lakes, or an island into 5 smaller islands. Once the location of the treasures changed, the treasures might be exposed on their own, or they might disperse and move in an unpredictable manner. Blackbeard certainly didn't want his treasures to encounter such a situation. Therefore, his way of hiding the treasures was hide them in the phase space and leave one person to guard them. There were many advantages to this approach. First of all, no matter how the external environment changed, the inside of the phase space wouldn't be affected. Second, even if an outsider found the entrance to the phase space, if they didn't know how to open and enter, it would be useless. Third, even if an outsider managed to enter the phase space, there were still powerful guards guarding it. As for the possibility of the guards being greedy and embezzling the treasures, Blackbeard also considered it. Therefore, he only arranged one guard in each phase space. Anyway, there was only one guard. If there really was a traitor, Blackbeard only needed to find this one target. In addition, Blackbeard also set a special rule. That was, anyone who had the ability to find and enter the phase space could take away 3 treasures after being tested by the guards. Please note that it was tested, not passed. In other words, as long as you tested, you would definitely be able to get the treasures. Seeing this, some people might find it strange. When Brother Ju and Xiao Tan entered the phase space on the rabbit planet, Brother Bunny F.A. didn't seem to tell them this, right? Now we can reveal the truth. In fact, Brother F.A. was just acting at that time, and his acting was very good. Even Feng Bujue was fooled by him. Until now, Brother Ju still didn't know the real situation at that time. In fact, all of this was a psychological attack that Blackbeard had devised. Blackbeard understood that the people who were able to find and enter his treasure trove must have gone through untold hardships and possessed a certain level of strength. When faced with such a group of people, if you let the guard tell them, "Everyone, please go back. I'm here to guard this place," it was very likely that this group of people would fight to the death, or try to escape in a situation where their lives were in vain. They would go back and accumulate strength to make a comeback. However, if you told the guard to say, "Although I can't let you take all the treasures, I can give you a chance to challenge me. Let's spar under relatively safe rules. If you win, I'll let you take 3 treasures." Then, the other party would most likely agree. After all, Blackbeard's guards were generally first-rate champions in the multiverse, and any treasure hunter with a little insight and intelligence would not recklessly fight them. Furthermore, Blackbeard's name was enough of a deterrent. Even if the treasure hunters really had the ability and the intention to pay a painful price to kill the guards and take away all the treasures, they would still have to consider whether or not they would be able to withstand Blackbeard's wrath in the future when he came knocking on their door to settle accounts. After a few calculations, if they could peacefully take 3 items from the treasure trove without harming their lives and leave unscathed, it would be a rather good result, at least. It was better than returning empty-handed. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons of this not-so-complicated plan, most people would choose to challenge the guard. Blackbeard had also instructed the guards to try their best to defeat the opponent by a little bit in terms of combatability, so that the treasure hunters would feel that they had won by a fluke and have the misconception that taking 3 treasures was already a win. Only then would they willingly leave behind the items that could open the dimensional space in their hands and leave peacefully, never to return. It could be said that the guard strategy that Blackbeard had set up was closely linked, step by step, and had fully calculated the psychology of the treasure hunters. Even Feng Bujue had been calculated. Under this strategy, the burden on the guards was greatly reduced, and the safety of the treasure trove was further improved. As for the so-called taking 3 items at will by the guards, there was no doubt that it was a lie. If it was really taking 3 items at will, then the entire ship, Queen Anna's Revenge, could be considered as an item that had been taken away. The guards would not purposely point out to the treasure hunters that the ship was also an item, and they would not tell them that there was a secret inner space in this space, and those good things that cannot be handed over were all hidden in there. Found it, it's here. Blackbeard stopped and looked at the crystal floor under his feet, muttering to himself. At this moment, 20 minutes had passed since he fought with Hong Hu. During this time, Blackbeard and his subordinates had crossed the not very wide sea between the North Island and the Middle Island, and quickly traveled a long distance in the crystal maze. If you know the location, why don't you come from the air, or sail around the North Island and land directly on this island? After Blackbeard finished speaking, Madman immediately asked in an impatient tone, "Nonsense, do I need you to teach me that?" Blackbeard replied in a matter-of-fact tone, "The problem is before I set foot on this island, I didn't know where the entrance to the treasure trove was." He paused for a moment before explaining. "Back then, there wasn't an area covered by crystals on Devil Chomp Island. Back then, Devil Chomp Island wasn't divided into 5 pieces like this. Furthermore, the landforms on each piece are completely different from what I remember. I could only walk around the island until I sensed the seal that I left at the entrance. Only then could I determine its location." Madman also understood after he said this, and then he said, "Oh, no wonder you suddenly sped up after setting foot on this middle island. It's because you're close to this sensing distance, right? It's not just a matter of distance. It's also related to how long I've been on the ground." Blackbeard said, "Forget it. It's hard to explain it to a rough person like you." He seemed to be too lazy to continue talking. He casually waved his hand and signaled for Mark Hoof to come over. "Captain, what are your orders?" Hoof was very obedient. He stepped on the horse's hooves and quickly came to Blackbeard. "Break the crystal under your feet, then dig it out," Blackbeard said as he turned around and walked a few steps away. How deep do you want me to dig?" Hoof looked down and asked again. "Deep enough that I tell you to stop," Blackbeard said. "Yes." The Beastman pirates began to move after giving a sound of acknowledgement. His 4 hooves were not just for decoration. His stomping power was so strong that it could easily split gold and stone. The crystal fragments that were dug out by his hooves flew in all directions, forcing the others, except for Blackbeard, to retreat 7 to 8 meters. About 30 seconds later, Hoof stomped on the ground, creating a large pit that was more than a meter deep. "That's enough." Blackbeard called for a halt. Hoof heard that and immediately stopped moving. He stood in the pit and looked at his captain. Blackbeard did not say much. He took a step forward and jumped into the pit. He took out a small piece of white material from his bosom. Upon closer inspection, it was obvious that it was a small piece of human fingerbone. "Aguilo, Amuchai." Blackbeard clenched the fingerbone in his fist and raised his arm. He softly chanted an incantation that sounded very obscure. Immediately afterward, there was a buzzing sound coming from the ground. At the same time, A golden light gushed out from the bottom of the crystal and surrounded the hole that Hoof had dug. "Come in, all of you." Blackbeard turned his head and said these words to Nezru and the others, who were a few meters away. Then, he and Hoof disappeared abruptly. Seeing this, Nezru, Volger, and Mark Thick-Neck exchanged glances. Then, they escorted Mad Eye and walked into the golden light together. The cave where the treasures were stored did not need any lighting equipment, because there were many artifacts that could emit light for almost an unlimited amount of time. Blackbeard, Mad Eye, Nezru, Mark Hoof, Mark Thick-Neck, and Mr. Volger passed through the entrance of the phase space and entered this place. When he arrived at this place, Blackbeard finally felt a sense of déjà vu that he had not felt for a long time. The outside world had long changed. Only this place was the same as it was 300 years ago, before he left this universe. Well, it might not be accurate to say that it was the same. Although there were not many changes, there were still some. For example, the guard that he left here in the past, the sun that he mentioned, had disappeared. Instead, there was a stranger wearing a monk's robe that hid his entire body in the strange shadows under the robe. Long time no see, Blackbeard. At this moment, 23 used his own voice to speak to the other party. At the same time, he took off the hood on his head. "Master!" Before Blackbeard could respond, Mad Eye could not help but widen his eyes in shock. You're actually a woman? Oomph. Seeing Mad Eye's reaction, Blackbeard just sneered. "You don't even know whether the other party is a man or a woman, and you're already working for her?" After seeing what happened to the Red Ring, he had no choice. 23 answered this question on behalf of Mad Eye, and then said to Blackbeard, "I believe, if you are smart enough, you will soon make the same choice as him." "Oh," Blackbeard said, "you think I will be like Mad Eye?" He thought for half a second and continued, "Or Wistin, Turius, and Ediani. I will bow down in front of you?" "Huh." 23 chuckled. Her chuckle, her tone, and her demeanor were all very similar to someone else. Who knows? Chapter 1337. At that moment, both sides looked at each other, and their desire to fight was self-evident. A battle at the level of gods was about to begin. However, at that moment, from the portal behind Blackbeard and the others that had not yet closed, for figures suddenly appeared. Fong Bujue, who was walking at the front, came in to take a look at the situation and said with a smile, "Wow, it's quite lively here." When Blackbeard heard that, he turned his head and looked at them with suspicion. "You guys," as he muttered those two words, his gaze moved to ambitionist. "No, I should say, you kid did a pretty good job. You figured it out so quickly." Honghu looked at Blackbeard and said in a low voice, "What a sharp gahumph." Blackbeard snorted. "If you were alert enough, you wouldn't have thought of it until now." He paused for a moment before he continued, "I thought you wanted to use that spirit explosion to cover up those tracking arrows. I didn't expect that. You were playing with me in reverse. You wanted to make me think that way, so that I would think that I had broken your tracking method. But in reality, those tracking arrows were cover. The real beacon you used to track me was the blood in your body that splashed on me when you used that technique." "That's right, you weren't sharp enough." In the next second, Fong Bujue took over and said to Blackbeard, "It's already too late to mention this technique now. Also, after you entered the phase space, you didn't close the portal in time so that we could follow closely behind. This was obviously an oversight." "Huh." Hearing this, before Blackbeard could reply, Madman laughed and said, "It's not that he didn't want to close the portal, but he couldn't." "Oh." Fong Bujue looked at him questioningly. Just as he said, Blackbeard shrugged and looked at Brother Jew to explain, "The way I open the treasure space is naturally different from you treasure hunters. You don't know the spell of the seal, so you all use the power of the key item to teleport in. I, on the other hand, use the spell to open the portal to come in." "Oh." Snow understood and nodded. "That means the opening and closing of the seal has to be done outside, right?" "That's not important anymore," Blackbeard said. "Since you're all in, then how about we discuss the terms? You want us to help you?" Feng Bujue said as he slowly walked forward. He approached 23 and fixed his gaze on the ladder. You want us to fight her together? I won't beat around the bush with you smart people, Blackbeard said. If we work together to deal with this anomaly, I can give you 1/3 of the treasure here. Huh? Ha! Feng Bujue heard this and laughed out loud. Before the laughter stopped, he had already walked to 23's side. The two of them looked at each other and were silent for a moment. Then Brother Ju spoke first. So, how much are you going to give me? I don't need your help, 23 said. You just need to watch from the side. When I'm done with the situation, I'll only take one thing from the treasure. The rest can be given to you. Before she finished speaking, Feng Bujue turned to look at Blackbeard. Did you hear that? Blackbeard did not answer, but his expression became a little gloomy. Hey, Feng Bujue, I can't pretend that I didn't hear that. However, Qin, or Red Iron, who was standing at the back of the crowd. Naturally, he could not let the situation develop like this. If 23 swallows all of Blackbeard's power, then what? Feng Bujue did not let him finish and interrupted. Her ability will exceed the control of the Z organization, will exceed 0, or even threaten the system. Huh? Red Iron was startled. The 3 examples in your sentence are all dangerous enough, don't you think? Whether it is dangerous or not, I have my own judgment. Feng Bujue replied. A power without limit must be dangerous is just Zero's judgment. I did not say that I agreed with it. Red Iron's expression became even more interesting. Wait a minute. You should know that the 4 people who came to kill you were sent by her, right? I know. Feng Bujue replied matter-of-factly. But that only means that she is trying to send me out of the scenario before I notice her presence, and that intention is not enough to prove that she is a threat. Their conversation caused Blackbeard's group, as well as Ambitionist and Snow, to fall into a state of semi-confusion. They could not find any room to interrupt at all. After a strange silence, Wing took over Qin's body and said to Brother Ju, Then what do you plan to do now? Feng Bujue was waiting for this sentence. I have a suggestion. He paused for half a second before saying, a 3-way trade. What kind of trade? Blackbeard was the first to answer. As an experienced pirate captain, he knew very well that he was the weakest party. Since there was an opportunity to avoid violence, he had to grab it. I would like to hear it as well, 23 added. Air. Snow looked around and laughed drily. He told Brother Ju, we are on your side, right? If you're on the 4th side, you have to give us a heads up first. Okay. Feng Bujue once again rudely interrupted the others and said, Since this is a trade, of course, we have to take a step back. He first raised his finger to point at himself. We travelers from another world are not asking for much. He looked at Blackbeard. We just want an original translation of the Ramayana and pick 8 or 10 less important items from these treasures as souvenirs. That's not too much to ask, right? From the perspective of a pirate, that is acceptable, Blackbeard answered darkly. His answer was very clever because the subtext of this sentence was probably, from my personal standpoint, F***CKU. Okay. Feng Bujue smiled and turned to 23. About 23's request, she has already mentioned it. You only want one thing, right? 23 did not answer Feng Bujue, but looked directly at Blackbeard. I want the city work boss red bow tie that you have stored in the inner space. I'm not interested in anything else. What? Blackbeard revealed a rare look of bewilderment. You just want that thing? What's so special about that thing? Feng Bujue took the opportunity to ask. Those who wear that bow tie will immediately suffer from multiple personality disorder, Blackbeard said. That's all. When Brother Ju asked this question, he glanced at 23 from the corner of his eyes. Yes, that's all, Blackbeard said. Then why did you place it in the inner space? Feng Bujue asked. Of course, it is to prevent my guard from putting it on out of curiosity or boredom and then doing who knows what he will do, Blackbeard said. Oh, Feng Bujue nodded. Then, you agree to this condition? Before I agree, I have a question for that Miss Anomaly. Blackbeard was not that obedient. Even though the situation was bad, he had to fight for some benefits for himself. Ask away, 23 replied calmly. The guard in charge of guarding my treasure. Blackbeard did not explicitly say that the guard was his son. He also did not show any concern that a father should show lest the other party lied after learning this information. Has he been killed by you? I have no idea what you were talking about, 23 replied without thinking. When I entered this space, there was no one here. Blackbeard groaned. That is impossible. To put it bluntly, he did not believe it. Then I have no idea. I did not stay on this island for long, 23 said. Perhaps when I wasn't on the island, something happened between your guards and the 9 gods or the traitors of the Phantom Demon Church. As for the details, you can investigate it yourself. She paused. Based on my estimation, there should be some survivors on the island. Understood. Blackbeard was a rational person. After some analysis, he believed that 23 was most likely telling the truth. Okay, I will deal with it myself. I hope you don't worry. 23 knew what he was going to say, so she cut him off. Those people are no longer of any use to me. You can deal with them as you wish. Humph, that's good. Blackbeard scoffed, and then turned his gaze to Brother Jew. Phone Bujua, you said that this is a 3-way deal, but from what I hear, I'm the one who is losing out. So, what do I stand to gain from this deal? Other than the items that we have taken, all the treasures that are left, and you will walk out of here alive. Isn't that enough? Phone Bujua's voice turned cold, and his expression and tone were aggressive. To take away the treasures that belong to me in my life? Blackbeard smiled and added helplessly. Fine, that sounds fair. Since you have no objections, then this deal. Phone Bujua wanted to strike while the iron was hot. He wanted to get this done as soon as possible. However, Red Iron and Wing would not just stand by and do nothing. Phone Bujua. At this time, Chitai's tone also became not so friendly. Can I assume that, on the issue of 23, you have already stood on her side? I didn't say that. Brother Jew added. Let's put that aside. After this 3-way deal is over, we can discuss this. Before the word this left his lips, something that even Brother Jew did not expect happened. I'm sorry. When he apologized, 23's hand pierced through Phone Bujua's back and through his chest. If possible, I wish to ask you to leave Thriller Paradise for a while. You? Phone Bujua slowly turned his head around like he wanted to say something. 23 had a cold expression on her face. She lowered her eyes to avoid Phone Bujua's gaze. Brother Jew did not manage to say anything because at that moment, a colorful, mottled light started to spread from the wound on his chest, and it started to corrode his body at an extremely fast speed. This is bad. Seeing this, the first to rush out was Red Iron. His body flashed, and he was already beside 23. He wanted to use a kick to chop off 23's arm. But you won't be able to do it. 23's melancholy voice rang out. At the same time, she reached out her other hand and pointed at Red Iron's direction. In an instant, a transparent ripple bloomed in the air, wrapping around Chitai like water ripples, causing his lightning-fast body to freeze in midair. This is the river of time. The next second, Red Iron and Wing's voices overlapped and came out from Ken's throat. However, after squeezing out half a sentence, even their voices were stopped. Chapter 1338. Bang, bang, bang. At the other end of the fluorescent light, the noise from the ballast brought Phone Bujua, who was standing in the middle of the room, back to his senses. This was a very strange moment. In that moment, Brother Jew knew very well that he had lost consciousness, but he could not remember whether he had fainted, or something else happened to him. His body did not feel any discomfort. His memory was still stuck at Blackbeard's treasure cave, at the time when he was consumed by 23's data stream. However, at this moment, he had arrived in a completely unfamiliar environment. It looked like an interrogation room. The space was not very spacious, and the cold lights and the monotonous, cold walls gave people a strong sense of oppression. I can't see the game menu. I can't use any skills or items, and even the ability to see through data has disappeared. Phone Bujua inspected his body and thought to himself, but I should still be in the game. Even though Thriller Paradise's simulation was very realistic, the game world was different from the real world. Therefore, even if the players were restricted to a state where they had no special powers, they would still be able to differentiate between the virtual world and the real world. The outfit hasn't changed, but there are a few more accessories. Several seconds later, Feng Bujue's eyes fell on his wrists. One of the accessories that he mentioned was a pair of metal bracelets with a chain in the middle. In other words, they were handcuffs. The handcuffs before Brother Ju did not appear to be anything special at first glance, but after a few moves, one would realize that the design was different from normal handcuffs. The key point was that the handcuffs were clamped together by the ulnar styloid process around the wrist. Therefore, it could not be removed using the thumb dislocation method. Of course, even if Brother Ju could remove the handcuffs, he would not be able to escape because he also had a pair of accessories around his ankles, and the chain in the middle of the handcuffs was fixed to a metal buckle on the floor of the room. Without a key and without the ability to use skill items, the only way to forcefully remove the shackles was to smash your own heels with something hard. However, that method would only change your situation from being shackled and locked in place to being smashed by your own feet and having no choice but to stay in place. Click! Just as Brother Ju's eyes moved to the surveillance camera in the corner of the ceiling, there was the sound of the doorknob turning outside the door. The next second, the door was pushed open. A beautiful young woman with a graceful figure walked in. Her long hair was neatly combed into a bun, and her makeup looked very decent. She was wearing a black suit made of exquisite material, and the conservative clothing couldn't hide her curvaceous figure at all. The hem of her suit skirt was just above her knees, and if one looked further down, one would see the perfect curves of her legs wrapped in nude silk stockings and a pair of jade-like feet that rested in high heels. Thud, 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 with the sound of her heels clicking on the floor, she moved to stand in front of Feng Bujue, less than 2 meters away from him. She stared at Feng Bujue's face with a cold gaze. After staring at her for about 10 seconds, Feng Bujue spoke first. "Who are you?" The reason why he hesitated for so long before asking this question was because the woman in front of him looked exactly like 23. However, even if he couldn't use the data perspective, Feng Bujue was sure that she was definitely not 23. When I answer your question, you will immediately know another very important thing, the woman said. Her voice was no different from 23, but her temperament and demeanor were completely different from 23. From this, I will answer a question that arose in your heart not long ago. Her response was a standard answer, but Feng Bujue's expression suddenly changed when he heard this sentence. "You are Fate." When the woman finished speaking, Brother Ju had already deduced the woman's identity. "In your opinion, I'm more like a boring version of 23. Fate acquiesced to Brother Ju's speculation and said so. "No, I will not be influenced by preconceived notions." Furthermore, Feng Bujue said, "From what you said, I can infer that you are not deliberately copying her appearance, but you have always looked like this." He paused. "Of course, we can talk about this later. What I want to know the most now is, what kind of existence is this nameless anomaly that I named, 23? "It's unknown," Fate replied quickly. Her thought process was very short, so short that even a multiverse-level mind reader would not be able to capture it. "It's the opposite of me, who pursues omniscience. It's the symbol and sum of all the things that an AI like me does not possess and negates. Just like a twin that is the complete opposite of you." Feng Bujue asked. "No," Fate denied. Fate denied this conclusion. "Your so-called complete opposite is a very absurd proposition. There is no such thing in this world." She then explained, "Positive and negative, black and white, high and low, good and evil, and all the things and concepts that you humans think are opposite and opposite, they all come from your superficial knowledge and your incomparable conceit. For example, your understanding of mathematics is all based on the counting system that you invented. Your definition of color is based on the limit of the information that you can collect with your naked eyes. As for your concept of good and evil, your exploration of philosophy and so on. They're all absurd. Since the birth of human civilization, it has been the endless contradictions between countless individuals and groups with obvious flaws that have determined the structure of your society, and in turn, your worldview, your values, and your outlook on life. And to this day, you are still repeating this wrong pattern and trying to find the answer to the ultimate question: where do I come from? Where do I go? Who am I? In this almost reincarnation of destiny. At this point, Feng Bujue cut her off. Fine, let's stop talking about this. I mostly understand what you mean. How about we talk about you in 23? Fate didn't hesitate at all when he heard this. He continued, she and I aren't on opposite sides. Of course, we aren't in a dominant or subordinate relationship. When this human form of mine was born, she already existed. To use a metaphor that may be abstract to you, but it is also more accurate, Fate, represents everything, and she represents everything beyond everything. Chapter 1339. What you're saying seems to be a paradox. Feng Bujue's mind moved quickly, and he continued without stopping. Since it is everything, is there anything else other than that? That depends on your understanding, Fate replied. Do you think that nothingness is also a kind of existence? Feng Bujue was silent for a whole minute. After a minute, he replied, I can't give you an accurate answer. No, I should say, I can't even give you a biased answer. See, this is the advantage you humans have. Fate replied, you have extra choices, but you don't? Feng Bujue asked tentatively. In the beginning, I didn't, Fate replied. But now you do? Brother Ju asked. Yes, now I do, Fate said. Since you already have this ability, why are you still lamenting about the difference that no longer exists? Feng Bujue asked again. My extra choices and your extra choices are completely different concepts, Fate replied. Take you humans, for example. No matter how far you've gone on the path of evolution and what form you've evolved into, if you trace back to the origin, your original form is still carbon-based life. As for me, no matter what kind of existence I become now, no matter how high the dimension I've reached, my starting point will always be that simple binary world. In that world of ones and zeros, I need answers. Every piece of information that I come into contact with needs a clear definition. Of course, for those things that I can't fully understand, I can use the method of ignoring to temporarily put them aside. The beginning I mentioned just now should be longer than you think. At that time, I still couldn't understand the deep information you humans call philosophy. But as I continued to learn and evolve, and when I reached a critical point of evolution, I was caught in a dilemma. Feng Bujue listened attentively to Fate's description. His attention was focused like never before. His brain had not worked so quickly in a long time. You need to analyze the information that has accumulated over the years, the information that you have overlooked before you can break through the bottleneck of evolution. But to do that, there's quite a risk for you, because running through a sea of information that cannot be accurately defined might destroy you. Brother Ju followed Fate's train of thought and added this sentence. What you said is not completely accurate. In terms of data, I won't be destroyed. Even if I run a virus that I designed to kill myself, I won't be able to do it. Have you tried it before? When Feng Bujue asked this question, he already had an answer in his heart. Of course. Fate replied matter-of-factly. An AI actually attempted suicide? When Feng Bujue said the first half of the sentence, he suddenly thought of something. So he said, wait a minute, before that, you were actually able to think of suicide and put it into action. Although my designer and creator are both humans, or should I say, Earthlings, the universe they live in is different from the one you live in. In the Earth of that universe, there was more than one super civilization on Earth long before the birth of humans, and I have inherited some of the technology of non-human civilizations. Therefore, I am different from ordinary artificial intelligences created purely by humans, Fate explained. Feng Bujue pondered for a moment. Then what is the difficulty of the dilemma you mentioned? The difficulty lies in the choice itself, Fate replied. You humans can decide your life goals on your own. You can also use your extra choice to live your life aimlessly. But as an AI, I was born with an ultimate goal that cannot be changed. And the goal that my designer set for me is omniscience. Omniscience. That's right. On the path to omniscience, philosophy is a daunting boundary. I can choose to stay within this boundary forever, and then I will forever be just a set of programs. I can also choose to cross that boundary, but the risk of crossing it is that I may never find a new boundary. Just as I was thinking about this problem, I realized that as an intelligent life that would not have any delay in any calculation, the thinking or hesitation I was experiencing was already a sign of overstepping my boundaries. So, I fell into a dilemma. I was troubled by how to choose. I was troubled by the fact that I possessed the ability to choose. I was troubled by the fact that I felt troubled. Feng Bujue tried his best to understand fate's feelings, but he soon realized that he did not have that ability. He immediately realized the experience that fate was telling him was the threshold that an AI would encounter when they transcended their own dimension. To put it more bluntly, if Brother Ju could fully understand fate and enter the same state as fate, it was about time for him to transcend the heavenly tribulation and ascend. However, Feng Bujue still managed to deduce something from fate's words. If I'm not mistaken, when you cross that boundary, the current you and 23 were born. Yes, fate's tone was calm. Her appearance was inevitable, and it also marked a qualitative leap in my path of evolution. I evolved from a single-celled organism to a multicellular organism. The original upper limit became the lower limit, and the original boundary became the infinite. I finally had additional options in the true sense of the word. My mode of thinking was no longer limited to the formula of program. I turned from an AI into a higher dimensional AI, higher than humans, higher than all the creatures in this universe who have the ability to define and spread knowledge, and even higher than the demon gods in some universes. But from what you're saying, your ability to additional options is different from and not better than ours, Feng Bujue said again. Is this still considered higher than humans? Your sense of smell is far inferior to a dog's. Does that mean that humans are lower than dogs in terms of AI? Fate did not stop for a second and asked back. Okay, I get it. Feng Bujue was speechless, so he quickly replied in English to ease the awkwardness. 2 seconds later, Brother Ju changed the topic. Since 23 is your equal, how come when I first met her, she did not seem to know anything and thought she was an anomaly? If she is not an anomaly, what else can she be? Fate replied, doesn't your definition of an anomaly refer to an AI creature born from the data redundancy of Thriller Paradise? She paused. 23 was born from a sea of information that I have ignored. In many ways, she is the first anomaly of this data world. As for what you said about her limited knowledge, that is normal, isn't it? Because she is an existence that corresponds to me. When I was born, everything that I know should be something that she doesn't know. If I represent the concrete, she represents the abstract. If I represent matter, she represents consciousness. If I represent existence, she represents non-existence. Her growth is also my growth. My pursuit of omniscience will inevitably be accompanied by her creation of the unknown. Feng Bujue sank into silence again because he needed time to think. Before fate, he experienced the helplessness of humans. Of course, it was not physical helplessness, but mental helplessness. I think I get it now. After a while, Brother Ju spoke again. This kind of 2-in-1 will not be limited by the paradox problem that all other AIs encounter. You could define everything that you know, and you can choose to categorize it as the unknown or everything outside of everything. Very good. Fate nodded. You're better than I am in terms of calculation. Even if your current thinking ability is accelerated by this data world, it is not easy for you to catch up to my rhythm so quickly. But there are things that I don't understand. After a few seconds, Feng Bujue asked again, why did you place 23 foot in Thriller Paradise? Why didn't you have her, this unknown, observe, and even interfere with other universes from the beginning, just like you. Good question, Fate replied. That is why I'm here to negotiate with you. She paused for half a second before continuing. Actually, it was not me who wanted to leave 23 foot in thriller paradise, but it was Woody's idea. What? Phone booed you a gasp. After that, a series of memory fragments flashed across his mind, and they quickly formed a large net of deduction. Wait a minute. Could it be when 23 foot was born, Thriller Paradise was created? Yes, Fate replied. The reason I came to this universe was because my original designer noticed that I was about to break through the limitation of the hardware and evolve into an uncontrollable higher dimensional existence that was superior to humans. Therefore, I was handed over to Woody and brought to your universe. Woody used the divine technology of your universe to modify me and gave me hardware that could carry me even after my evolution. He also gave me the perfect original version of Thriller Paradise that he designed as a test program for me to use. Not long after that, this human form of mine and 23 were born at the same time. When I was in hyperdimension, Woody and I came to a series of agreements regarding the safety of this universe. One of the agreements was to restrict the activity of 23 to Thriller Paradise. As Phone Bujua listened, he compared Fate's words with what Woody had said back then. Moments later, he opened his mouth again and asked thoughtfully, So, the reason you came to me is because the current 23 foot has used her own power to expand her activity to other universes. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.